Welcome to DAX Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us on another edition of DAX Machina. Joining me tonight is Anthony Pitbull Canatella and Pocket Doc Carrie Davis, and we have a special guest in the house tonight, Justin Chernipeski from Mountain Beast Mysteries. Did I say that right?
You did. You nailed it.
Awesome. I'm super excited to have him in the house tonight. If you guys have not watched Mountain Beast Mysteries, get over to that channel and check it out. He has got some of the best Bigfoot documentaries, as far as I'm concerned, the best out there. He's got a very no-nonsense approach. He's a firefighter. Has been a firefighter up in Alberta, Canada. He goes way out into the deep woods to capture some of the best footage I've seen, as well as just giving us some of the best stories and details. It's a fantastic no-nonsense approach, and I think if you guys enjoy this kind of content, you're going to love his channel. So definitely check it out. Justin, thank you for joining us tonight, brother. I'm gonna jump in and throw the ball to you and let you introduce yourself for those who aren't familiar with the channel. And I'm posting the link to your channel in the chat right now, so everybody can make sure they like, subscribe, and share that channel as well.
Yeah, well, my name is Justin Chernipeski, and back in late 2013, I decided to enter this crazy world of Bigfoot by making a Bigfoot documentary called Wild Man, My Search for Sasquatch. And after it kind of flopped, like everywhere that I put it, I threw it on YouTube, and from then on, kind of blew up. I had a channel called Mountain Beast Mysteries, and now it has over 118,000 subscribers. So it's been a wild ride over the years.
Yeah, I completely understand that. We're still growing. I hope to be where you're at one of these days. But yeah, again, man, you've got some fantastic content. My hat's off to you. Really big fan.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
So you said you got into it in 2013. Was there a specific event that got you into this? Or you just one day decide, you know what the hell, I'm going to make some Bigfoot videos?
I had always been interested in the subject since I was a kid, because my dad was really into like the unexplained, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, obviously. And we would always rent VHS movies from like wherever you could rent movies back in the day. And he would always rent these documentaries about weird stuff like that. So I kind of got into it at a really early age. And in 2013, my dad was telling me about an experience he had on Vancouver Island, like probably 5 or 6 years prior, when he was living out there. And he had a rock throwing experience when he was fishing on a lake, where like a giant rock came flying out of the bushes on the shore and like hit a tree right at the edge of the shore, pushed it over, and then the tree like kind of tipped off the tree and into the water and made a big splash. And he saw the whole thing. And he was already a believer in Bigfoot, so that's what he believed it was right from the start. And he was very excited to tell me that story. And I said, well, you know, I'm looking at getting into filmmaking anyways, because I've been interested in it for a while. And this seems like a very accessible topic to get into, because I already live close to a lot of these hot spots. And I love the outdoors, hiking and camping, and it just seemed like the perfect subject to attack. So, yeah.
Have you had a face-to-face encounter of your own?
I haven't, no, I don't think so. I had a weird experience a couple months ago where I was out in the bush, and I was sitting down, like just enjoying my music, and I thought I saw something that looked like the shape of a Sasquatch, like head and shoulders. It was very it looked like a silhouette, like it was very shadowy and whatnot. And then a couple hours later, I looked back at that spot and it was gone. And so I kind of was doing experiments to see if it had anything to do with where the sun was in the sky and stuff like that, but I couldn't really ever recreate it. So I don't know what that was. It's probably nothing. And then there was one time where we were bluff charged by something at night in the dead of winter on some guy's property who claimed to have had Sasquatch like messing around in his yard, throwing stuff at the house. He actually had a visual sighting of it. And while we were measuring tracks at night, something ran towards us that was absolutely massive and heavy, but it was just like in the darkness down a ravine a little ways away, but we heard it run up the ravine towards us and it just stopped and we couldn't see anything. And then the weird thing was is that whatever this was made the sound of a horse, which was very peculiar. Now, this was in the winter. There's snow all over the ground. We searched everywhere day and night to find any sign of horse, and there was not one horse track, but there was like a major Sasquatch trackway going through his yard, through his property. And so it's weird because a lot of people believe that Sasquatch can mimic other animals, and horses being one of them.
Yeah.
And there's a large population of wild horses out in a lot of these hotspots here in Alberta. So they would live in very, very, very close proximity.
Sorry about that. Somebody's mowing their yard outside my house. I was like, what the hell is that? Sorry about that. Completely wrecked my train of thought. Now, you said there are wild horses in that area, and that it definitely mimicked the sound. That's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard people say that heard them mimic owl calls, wolf calls, coyotes, and even human voices, like the cadence of a human voice.
Yeah, yeah, and you get all those weird stories where people claim that the hair on the horse has been braided or messed around with. It's also very strange. Like where this guy's house was, there wasn't a population of wild horses, but there's a population of wild horses in a major hotspot that you can get to if you take a pretty substantial river that goes pretty close to where this guy lives. So they can use the waterway to, travel and get to that area quite easily. So.
One of the videos you did is actually we did a show about it as well. Was the story of the Nahani Valley. Now I know a lot of people may not be familiar with that, but I find that story just absolutely fascinating because of the sheer volume of people that have either gone missing or been killed in that valley. How far is that from you?
That's pretty far north, up in the Northwest Territories. Like it's very far north, and it's a very protected park now. Like you can't really do much exploring in there without permission, or if you're on like a guided trip.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of reports of people going missing, bodies turning up without heads. And oddly enough, there's reports of people that like are very ancient type of people, not quite Sasquatch, but just very primitive, giant, cannibalistic people. So there's a lot of crazy stories out there, a lot of mythology, a lot of legends, and it's all like the Dene First Nations is the First Nations group that occupies that area, and their culture is just rich in all kinds of lore like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing I thought was really odd about the Nahani Valley is there is a valley down in the Superstition Mountains in Arizona where a very similar thing has been happening. People that have gone into that valley have been found missing their heads. And another thing I found really coincidental about that is that area it was a part of the original grounds where the Navajo and the Apache migrated and traveled. And the interesting part about that is you said that the native tribe around the Nahani Valley were called the Dene. The Dene is the name the Navajo refer to as that they call themselves.
Interesting.
And it's strange that you've got a tribe with almost identical name having that same type of activity in valleys that are thousands of miles apart.
I mean, yeah, it is crazy. Well, it's crazy that pretty much all the First Nations groups in North America have some kind of story or legend of a hairy wild man. Mm-hmm. It's like they've been around. They've been around living in the wilderness for thousands of years. So of course they would have seen something. And the First Nations people back in the day were definitely a lot more in tune with everything around them than we are today.
Oh, I definitely agree. Now, I know a lot of different people have a lot of different researchers have different approaches on this, And I wanted to ask you, what do you think it is? Do you think it's a relic population of Gigantopithecus? Do you think it could be a relic population of Neanderthal or something else entirely?
I don't know what it is. I'm open to all the theories. I don't know what it is, but what I feel is that this thing might actually have something to it that is beyond what we can conceive. What we can comprehend. And it doesn't have to be a supernatural, paranormal, woo-like thing. It could be a special adaptation, that it could be a first for some sort of creature or being on this planet. Maybe it might have some sort of ability to shift its actual frequency of existence. Mm-hmm. Maybe as some sort of a defense mechanism or something that maybe it's developed over time. Because there are quite a few strange stories of that appear to have mystical elements, but I don't know. So we have physical evidence, we have trace evidence, we got footprints. So what's the deal with that? It's a tough thing to try and answer. I'm open to all the theories, and I'm glad that different groups are doing different things. They're researching in different ways, and we have all the bases covered as far as research goes, despite everyone, bickering all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the cryptid community. I'm like you. I'm open to lots of different possibilities. I've got my own pet theories, but really, when it comes down to it, the theories are really all we have until it's actually proven to science, or we've got one to study. We're all operating on theory, and anybody that claims to be an expert is probably trying to sell you something.
Yeah, probably.
It's always been my experience anyway.
I hear stories floating around here and there. You'll hear every now and then that somebody might have a body, or somebody hit one with a car, and there's stories that you don't find online. If you go digging around the hunting communities, if you get in online forums that are hunting forums and stuff, people that are normal people that don't really believe in this stuff, or they're not really into it, into researching it, they have experiences and they don't really know where to go, so they go in these hunting forums. And I know a lot of people in the hunting community, and they have people telling them all kinds of crazy stories. So there's more going on than what you actually see on the internet. It's pretty crazy.
One of the things I find most interesting about that is they're in different parts of the country, like down where Anthony's at, down in Florida. You've got the skunk ape stories, and the physical descriptions vary greatly from the ones that you get described up in the Pacific Northwest. I think that it's entirely possible that we've got not just regional adaptations, but maybe even different subspecies of a creature that has probably been prowling around since we were learning to make fire.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, animals and organisms in different areas will adapt differently based on their environment, but it might not even be the same at all as Bigfoot of the Pacific Northwest. It could be some sort of monkey-like primate. I mean, you're getting pretty close to more tropical areas down there. So
yeah. Right. The descriptions of the skunk ape seem to be more orangutan or chimp-like than the relic hominid that they seem to be describing from Patterson-Gimlin. The physical characteristics are very different, which I find very interesting.
Yeah. There's I'm sorry, but even in Florida, like you were saying, it's not even the skunk ape. It's I don't know if Justin knows this. We have Mayak monkeys that run around the Ocala National Forest from Silver Springs when they brought them in. So you're getting all these crazy sightings, even when people say, oh, it's an infant hanging in a tree. Well, yeah, it could be, but I've seen it with my own two eyes on my property. Where I had my property, I was on 4 acres in the middle of nowhere out in Fort McCoy area, Orange Springs. And they stand about 4 to 5 foot tall. And when I seen it, I thought somebody spiked my drink, because I was like, what the hell is a monkey doing in a pine tree? You hear these stories, but and FWC wants you to shoot them because they carry hepatitis, a bad hepatitis with them. So yeah, I mean, there's been different variances, like DA said. I mean, I'm even getting pictures of ones that from South Florida to New Mexico to Alaska that look almost similar. That's the crazy part too. You know, so.
Like if you catch one of those things moving quickly through the bush, somebody might think it was a skunk.
Right, and that's what I think too, because you know they always say it's a juvenile or it's this, it's that, or you know, they don't have monkeys down in New Mexico. They don't have monkeys up in Alaska. Here we have them, and if you look it up, they're in Silver Springs. They were led here. They were actually brought here to do, if I'm not mistaken, the Tarzan movies back in the 40s and 30s. And they didn't know these monkeys could swim. So they put them on an island, and these things swam across the Silver Springs River. And now they're all over Ocala, all the way up to Orange Springs and Palatka. So, yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah,
mistake.
because whoops is right. Yeah.
I like to ask this to pretty much everybody we have on the show. But it's something that I always find interesting. What is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your own personal encounter. What is the most terrifying story you're aware of? The thing that scares you most about being out there? Because I know you spend a lot of time out there completely by yourself, and I think that's got to be a little unnerving at times.
Well, like any story where someone is taken or killed is obviously the scariest. Like, well, you got the famous Albert Osman story where he was carried off in a sleeping bag. Don't know if it's true or not, but the story itself would be.
And Mushalot Harry and
the Mushalot Harry story is also, that's probably even more terrifying because there was like a gang of Sasquatch that he was, I guess, surrounded by where he was dropped off. But the Bowman story, Roosevelt's book, the
Wilderness Hunter.
Wilderness Hunter, where the guy pretty much nearly gets decapitated. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like anything like that. Like obviously, if you're out walking around in the woods by yourself in the deep backcountry, where these things are supposed to be, you think of these stories and it creeps you out. And then you think of all the missing 411 stories that are just not solved, and the weird circumstances surrounding them. Like any of those stories are terrifying.
Well, the show you did just recently, the documentary about the young boy that went missing back in the 1930s. That's a great video. And you referenced the missing 411 cases in that quite a bit. And I think that, you know, while we do have thousands of people every year that go missing in national parks, and a good deal of them are completely explainable, like animal predation, or they, you know, got lost and fell into a crevasse or something like that. You know, a lot of them can be explained, but there are the ones that just baffle the mind. Like in the one you did, how hikers miles away saw this kid way up on a mountainside where there's no way a 3-year-old could have made it. I think he was 4, but there's no way a child that small could have made it there.
No, and it's that place where the child was spotted on that outcropping was called Devil's Nest. And
that's
like,
something else I find fascinating is how many, if you look at the old maps, how many places are named Wildman Creek or Werewolf Creek or, you know, Devil's Woods. They're everywhere. They're
coincidentally great places to look for Sasquatch or to look for old reports, because there usually is quite a few. And it's like, I'm pretty sure those names were given to them by the indigenous people.
Mm-hmm. It's not there by accident. It's like nobody ever looks at a beautiful spring coming up out of the ground and, you know, we're going to call that Devil Spring. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Call it that. There's got to be a reason.
You know what's crazy to think about though is like we have these crazy stories, these missing 411 stories, but I wonder what kinds of stories hadn't been documented from like say like 500 years ago. Like they might have had some like crazy violent like attack stories back in the day
that just didn't get reported.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I find interesting is, and this happened to Anthony, is the number of hunters who've had one in their scope and then, you know, didn't shoot because they thought it looked either too human or they weren't sure what it was, so they didn't take the shot. But then you look at the missing 411, the hunters, and I think those guys are the ones that took the shot.
It's quite possible, but like no one will ever know. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Like there are people who apparently have taken the shot too and have made it out, but are they telling the truth? Like it's really, you can't prove this stuff. That's the problem with all these anecdotes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is the case. You know, there's some, and we all know the stories. There's some that are just, you know, people that are just telling some sort of fantastic tale to try to get their 15 minutes of fame, but that's not the case. I mean, you know, sure, if you took 50% of all reported Bigfoot sightings and just tossed them out as a hoax, and I think that's an overly large number, but you still got 50% that are absolutely credible. We've got reported sightings coming in from all walks of life. I mean, you were a firefighter. I was in law enforcement. I know a lawyer that had a sighting. I've heard recorded sightings from sitting judges who didn't want their name mentioned because they're a sitting judge. There's too many people from all walks of life. It's not just like the old videos from the 70s where it was the guy with 2 teeth reporting a tornado or a UFO from the trailer park. There's some credible sources out there.
Justin, the only thing, when DA said that I had it in my scope, the only thing that stopped me is, and I'm not even going to say, you say, why did you think I didn't shoot it?
I don't know, legal repercussions. I don't know.
No, not even that. I wouldn't even cared about that. And I, being honest, I wouldn't have.
Was it like a humanity thing you sensed from it, or?
It looked too human to me. That was the whole thing. When I zoomed in on it, I had a 308 bolt action with ballistic tips, and I had a Night Force scope on it. I mean, military grade Night Force scope. This thing was set up for long distance, and this thing was only I'm pushing 200 yards with that rifle. Ain't nothing. You know, I could have actually pegged this thing. I mean, crossed it right here, dropped it right there where it stood. But when I looked at it, it was like my mind wasn't computing. It wasn't picking. It was like, what am I seeing here? And that was the whole thing. I used to laugh at people. DA, I'd laugh at me like, you're crazy. You ain't no friggin' Bigfoot. There's nothing. Until that one day.
How can anyone make, that's a huge decision to make, to shoot something like that.
Right.
Like, that's a huge decision. And so how can anyone make a decision like that when they're confused, like so confused, don't know what they're looking at, scared, like, all the feelings that you'd be feeling would probably prevent you from making any sort of decision. So I feel like even just from that, it'd be really hard to shoot something.
Yeah, and it wasn't threatening me. It didn't yell at me. No aggressive gesture. Nothing. It just turned its head, looked at us. That's how I seen it. Turned its head, just started walking right into the palmettos, and that was it. But I got a good look at it through that scope. From head all the way down to its torso almost. You know, that thing stood about 10 foot tall almost. That was a big, and it wasn't big. It was, how can I put it? Like I said to DA, it was beach body muscular.
So how did that though compare? How did it compare to like what we believe the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch to be like?
The one up, like the Patty one and the ones by you are way bigger than the ones here in Florida. Just like the chest, and this one had long, broad shoulders, but it was more, he looked like the Rock, but just cut. You could see all the cuts under and it was hair. Everybody thinks when they see hair, Bigfoot, it's going to be so hairy you can't. No, it's not. The hair, you could see right through because you could see it coming out of the skin. You know, like the Patty one was so hairy, you can't really see the skin underneath it. The one I seen looked more caveman and aborigine and human-like, and it was so cut and big, and the skin underneath was like almost like an ash black gray, and no hair on the face.
When you look at like an orangutan, like the hair is quite thin, very easy to see the skin. But the samples we have of Sasquatch hair from up here, it's actually very thin hair itself. Like it almost looks like a woman's hair, like long hair, like maybe 4 to 5 inches long.
Same here.
That's how long the strands are, and it's like it doesn't look like fur or anything from any other animal.
No, are they hollow? The hair's hollow shaft? There's no shaft in it, right?
Yeah.
Same here. Same in Florida. They're hollow, so they're picking up the ambient light around it. That's what me and DA believe it. That's how it cloaks itself. It's like a polar bear hair. It's picking up the light, picking up colors, and that's what I believe it's doing. That's a perfect camouflage, perfect ghillie suit. That's what that is.
But how does something like Patty, how do you explain that? Because, I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive creature. You're talking apples and oranges compared to Florida. Florida, there's a lot of food out in the swamp. I think the reason why they're not that big here, I think it's the heat. The heat, the landscape, the ones up in the Pacific Northwest by you, they're mountains, ridges, they're climbing, moving. So they're putting on more muscle and more calories. I mean, that's what I believe. I believe they're just eating a hell of a lot more than what the ones here in Florida.
I think we can use bears as a reference. I mean,
There
the
you go,
farther
yeah.
north you get, the bigger the bears get.
Yeah, the Kodiak, the brown bear up in Alaska. Look at the size of that.
The heavier amount of protein in their diet, the bigger they're going to get. Like you get down here in Missouri, we have primarily black bears, and they don't get huge. I mean, they're an omnivorous animal. They eat a lot of berries and roots, but they'll eat termites. They'll eat meat if they find it, and by and large, it's usually scavenged, but they will hunt. But they're not a primarily hunting animal. Where you get up to like the northern grizzly bear, that animal eats a lot more protein. It exists more mostly on meat. It's still omnivorous, but it will eat a lot more meat, and it gets a lot bigger. Farther north, you get to the polar bear, and that thing is freaking massive, and all it eats is protein.
Yeah, I mean, it does appear to kind of be that way. It makes sense.
The polar bear.
It makes sense.
Well, the polar bear and the brown bear actually, they made a hybrid bear now. I'm sure you heard about that, Justin, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the same structure, so they can mate and produce offspring. That one I was watching a show because I used to hunt. If I can, I'd get back out there, but I haven't hunted ever since I had my sighting. But I used to watch these shows, and this guy kills. He thought it was a grizzly bear. It wasn't. It was the hybrid polar bear grizzly mix. I don't know if you've seen that, but this thing was massive. It's massively big. It's just crazy the sightings that, like, even where you're at, these things are so big. It's just it blows your mind sometimes. True.
Yeah, when you actually realize how tall 10 feet tall is, and like have a diagram of how tall it is compared to a person, it's insane. Like no one would stand any chance against one of these things.
No, absolutely not. And I don't advocate shooting one. I mean, I know there are a lot of people that are never going to believe they exist until they either see one or a body is brought in for study. But I have no plans to be that guy. Anytime I go out into the areas that I go where I research, I do carry a firearm, but that's more for self-defense than anything. I don't want to be the guy that tries to bring one in. I have no plans on it. The only way I plan to ever shoot one is if it's in self-defense or depending on, one of the people that are with me. I'll have to be being aggressively attacked before I'll open fire. I don't want to be the guy that brings one in. That's just not my thing.
I wonder what like the circumstances were to people like going missing and being taken. Like, were they just minding their own business, or did they do something questionable that like upsets one of them maybe? Or like, I wonder what the circumstances are usually most of the time.
Well,
I think some of them are opportunistic. I think, and this is just personal theory. I have nothing to base this on other than the difference in behaviors from different accounts from different people. But I think you're going to see as wide a variety of behavior among Bigfoot type creatures as you do among people. Surely they're going to be ones that are mean. They're going to be ones that are friendly. They're going to be ones that are serial killers. I mean, we have serial killers among humans. I just think it's individual temperament, and a lot of it will have to do with location too. If you're way off the beaten path, like a lot of the places you go, I think you may find more aggressive response there than you would find at one that is used to people, that's more habituated around areas where people live.
It's funny you say that. My friend Ken Walker, he's a world champion taxidermist. He's in some of my videos. He's a really good guy.
I've seen the guy.
Yeah.
Super knowledgeable on the Sasquatch subject. But he stresses every time, like I was just talking to him the other week out at our research site. He said in that area there is one older male Sasquatch that is not nice and doesn't like people. I heard a story that apparently somebody ran into a female one, and I can't remember if it had juveniles with it or not, out in that area. I think it was on a cut line somewhere. And the trapper was terrified. I believe what he did was he fired a shot to try and scare it away.
Mm-hmm.
But then this grouchy male Sasquatch just burst out of the bushes, out of the trees, because it thought that he had shot this female Sasquatch. And it almost kind of like bluff charged him and scared the crap out of him.
You know, I can see how that would be a case. I mean, you know, some of these creatures probably aren't going to react well to being shot or even shot near. I wouldn't want to try to give something like that a warning shot. I mean, you know, how many stories have you heard about people that have only wounded a grizzly bear and the carnage that ensues from a wounded, pissed off grizzly bear?
Yeah.
So then you transfer that to a primate that's 10 feet tall and 1,200 pounds. What do you think that thing's going to do?
Well, it's just like what Fred in Alaska said, DA. You know, for some reason, the ones up there are very aggressive, Justin. You know, and this is a guy that's a Native American tribal member. You know, it's like he even said you don't even have to go out and look for them. They'll come right out of the wood line to you, just to show you the dominance, to say, all right, you don't belong here, get out of here. You know,
I wonder why that is. I wonder if that's because Alaska is just so much more dangerous than like down here and more wild. So naturally, they might be more aggressive.
Well, then you've got the area that they refer to as the Alaskan Triangle, where so many people go missing every year.
Yeah, is that like? Well, isn't a lot of that related to like UFO?
They think some of it is, but a lot of it is just people that, you know, even experienced hunters that go out and just don't come back.
I mean, here's the thing, man. Maybe they're just more territorial up there in that triangle. Maybe they're just more territorial up in the you know, as you go further northwest. You know,
I think that's what it is, Doc. I think that's what he said, Fred. I'm not sure, Fred. If you're in the show, man, comment. I know he said it to us, and I can't remember what it was. Why they're so aggressive, but that was his belief.
I mean, it's such a rugged territory. I mean, it would be more like a survival of the fittest type of thing up there. And if they gauge anyone or anything as a threat to their existence, I would see that, you know, being on the evolutionary scale, that they would want to establish dominance, you know, forthwith. And that way, you know, if they are the more aggressive species up there, then nobody's going to screw with them. And so that's just a scientific guess, or what we call a swag, a scientific wild ass guess, you know, in the medical field. So
exactly.
I mean, you know, it seems to have some merit, and that's why, you know, maybe they're just more aggressive up there simply because they have to be more territorial and protect their hood, so to speak.
Right. Justin, you've been in those areas. Are they aggressive towards you or no at all?
I've never been to Alaska before.
Well,
how
in
about
that
in
area
Alberta?
where you are, yeah, like Alberta area.
Well, no, there's like the story I just told you of the big angry one running out of the bushes. Like that's
right.
Apparently, the extent of most of the cases is like a bluff charge or something like that.
Okay.
But I have heard stories of people going into certain areas near that spot and, you know, making it out. There have been people that have actually like died.
Oh, well,
But that's deep in like the hunting community. You won't hear stories like that online. Like a lot of these stories I hear from Ken Walker. He knows everything. Everybody who goes to him with an animal tells them all their crazy hunting stories. And he likes to call himself the hairdresser of the Bigfoot world, because when you go to the hairdresser, you swap stories and talk.
And Justin, I got a question for you, man. You said earlier in the podcast where you are, there's a very high population of wild horses. Has there been reports of, wild horse carcasses, things like that, with, pieces of them gone, hindquarters, such as that?
That I do not know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I know, because there was some, I can't remember who it was on one of our previous shows that talked about how there was a horse with literally the hindquarter was shorn, just torn from the body.
Right, I remember that too, Doc.
I just heard of that.
Yeah, tremendous amount of strength, which would kind of fit the MO.
Yeah. I don't know of anything like that, but every time I see these horses, I now kind of try and have a close look at the hair to see if it's braided or anything like that. The horses in this area are very tame too. Like a person can probably walk right up to them, but there is a lot of them, and they actually they hang out exactly where all these crazy tree structures are. So they're right where they would be if they were in close proximity. They're right together. So
maybe they have some sort of symbiotic relationship.
Could be. Speaking of the tree structures, I know you filmed quite a few of those. In your experience, I know you've in some of your videos you filmed, like I said, you filmed quite a few of those. What do you think? What do you think they signify, and what do you think is the difference between one that's probably man-made and one that you actually think might be Bigfoot-made?
Well, obviously, like the size of the logs and the orientation and how they're weaved together, like they affect my, I guess, decision on if it's a person-made thing or a Sasquatch-made thing. So, like a person can only lift so much.
Yeah. But
then again, there's some fancy tricks you can do with like ropes and everything. You can find a way to use mechanical advantage to your advantage. And in a lot of these areas, I mean, back in the day, like hydraulic equipment could easily like rip trees out of the ground and flip them around, and you could do all sorts of things. It's really hard to say. I don't know as far as what it signifies to Sasquatch. I'm kind of the belief in my area that it signifies a location where they all might gather before the winter, and then before it starts snowing, they'll head out to their wintering spot together. Which is
so
actually
you believe
not that far away.
They migrate. Same thing, that they migrate almost.
It seems that they move almost in like a circular way throughout the seasons. They'll move constantly, like throughout the seasons. But we've kind of came to the conclusion that like the early season, like late May, maybe early June, is like a really good time to go look for them. The shoulder season, when they might be on the move, or you have a better chance of catching them out in the open. Right. And also the shoulder season into the fall, like in October, and coincidentally, that's when like the Patterson footage was filmed.
Right.
It seems to be in the off season.
Same thing that Jesus was saying, that they migrate, because he's on the Navajo reservation, and he says they do migrate. From what he sees in his research, and even some of the stuff, the pictures, that we were getting, that we showed you earlier, you're getting the same. Is this thing actually traveling thousands of miles? I mean, or is it just a face structure that's the same all over, in certain species, like DA was saying, that's the whole thing. Nobody knows. There's no expert in the field.
No, so nobody's gonna know until they actually witness any of the stuff with their own eyes.
Exactly. One of the tree structures that you filmed that I found, well, a couple of them actually, that I found to be the most compelling, is there was that one teepee structure where they were kind of woven together, but the trees that were broken off, there was no stump for them anywhere around. They had been brought in from quite a distance. It wasn't like they were broken broken off and put in place right there. They'd been brought in, and that was a big log. And the other one that I thought was really, really interesting was the one that was balanced like a fulcrum.
Yeah, so both of those structures are now on the ground. So at some point in time in the last couple years, probably, someone or something has taken them down, or they've just fallen down naturally. The one that was all like a teepee and weaved together, I have a hard time understanding how that would fall down naturally. I feel like somebody would have had to do that with force. But when I was out there a couple weeks ago, we had found another structure actually that we've never seen before, a little ways away from there. And it also had one of those balanced logs, those horizontal logs, and like it's a big one. Like it's weird. It could be natural, but it's weird. And I explored that whole area a couple weeks ago again. I was walking around and I had found a few like little smaller structures that did seem very out of place and peculiar that I had never found before. And I don't know, I can't really explain it.
Well, I know snow load can account for certain structures. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that's going to walk out in the woods and anytime you see two sticks together in an X formation, it's instantly Bigfoot. But I have seen trees that were fairly young saplings that had been bent over and jammed into the ground so deep I couldn't pull it back out of the ground.
Yeah, like I'm usually looking for stuff that's like weaved together, because then you can't like say snow load or anything.
We don't get that much snow around here. I mean, it's been. I was a kid last time we got a foot and a half, 2 feet of snow. I mean, our usual winters are ice more than snow. But to find something bent over and jammed in the ground in this area is pretty uncommon.
Yeah, stuff like that is peculiar and weird, and it's like you'll probably never find out what did that. But anything that's like weaved together, or anything that has horizontal floating logs that always seem to be perfectly horizontal, that's the stuff that I like to look at. But it's like when you find that in an area where people usually shouldn't be or aren't, I mean, it's like, what else is doing this? Like in that area where I do my research, there's so many of them concentrated into such a small area that it's hard to see it as a coincidence or just like a natural phenomenon. It's weird. I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're what they're marking. I don't know if maybe they're just symbols. Like symbols in ancient cultures are huge.
Yeah, like
they're all about that in their mythology and stuff like that for whatever reason. But like, who really knows?
I don't know that we'll ever really fully know what these structures mean, what they're intended for. There's a lot of speculation about what they are, but I don't think we're ever really going to know for sure. It's not like there's a Bigfoot dictionary we can pick up and it's, that's what this means. But I think that there certainly is some sort of significance to them. As to what it means, it's kind of up in the air. But the fact that you found some when you were so far off the beaten track leads me to think it's highly unlikely it was another person, because some of the places you go, you backpack for more than a day to get there. And that's just not a place somebody's going to go build a structure and go, the next guy that comes hiking through here is going to freak out, because it might be years before the next person comes into that area.
Yeah. Well, hoaxers are lazy people. That's why they're trying to make a quick buck. So they're not going to hike out 25 kilometers out into the bush to make a structure.
There was one video, and I won't say who it was by, because I'm sure quite a few people have seen it, and there might be some people in the audience that think this person is all that in a bag of chips. But I won't say who it is, but I watched one of his videos, and he was talking about how he was deep in the woods in his research area, and that he was baiting an area for putting out apples and stuff. And as he's focusing on the apples, you hear a car go by in the background.
Yeah, I don't know who that is. I'm not familiar, but that
I could
wouldn't surprise me.
I can send you the video. You'd probably get a chuckle out of it. It's on YouTube. That's all I'm willing to say on the air. But I was just chuckling. I'm like, hey, that's a car, and it sounds like it's on a highway, not on a dirt road.
Well, they're at this research area that I go to all the time. One of my buddies, who is like the founder of our Alberta Sasquatch organization, he was out in the area camping, looking for Bigfoot, like just having a good time. Like there was drinking going on, and he took an apple and he was drunk and he whipped it up into the trees, and it stuck like way up high in between these branches. And this apple was filmed by someone else in the Bigfoot community and put in a documentary claiming that it was from Sasquatch. Like, how did this apple get up in the tree? When in reality, my drunk friend threw it up in the tree. And it's in a documentary.
That's
hilarious.
Right. Yeah. I love stuff like that. And because you know some people might are like, oh my God, how'd they get there? And when you know the origin story, it just cracks you up.
I know. You never know how this stuff happens. It could be something as ridiculous as
that. Doc, you cracked me up, brother.
Sorry, guys. I'm
yeah. This hotel internet sucks. We should not have my house right now. Trust me.
They must have fucking dial up here. Pardon my French, but yeah.
Bringing it in my dog's
Sorry, Justin. I'm not trying to be a dick, man. Just frustrating.
I know it's aggravating, Doc. It is.
Yeah, it is. I really wanted to listen to what you were saying, so I apologize. I'm not trying to be a distraction.
That lake where your dad had the experience where something threw the rock, you shot a video there, and in that video you were camped out like right near the shores of that lake. And did you have anything approach your camp while you were there?
Not that I'm aware of. There were the only really weird things that happened in that area is that there were a lot of times where I thought I heard some people talking that sounded like people, but they're like, I was the only one up that road, and I was up there like kilometers. Like there's nobody else up there. It was just a one road that goes up to that lake. And when it was quiet, like there was rain and whatnot going on pretty much the whole time I was there, but I sworn I could hear some sort of chatter that sounded like people. So I was like, I wonder if there's like some sort of like echo or sound carrying from somewhere up in these mountains, maybe like loggers or something.
Did it sound like the infamous samurai chatter, or was it more like...
It sounded like people talking, but I couldn't make out words, like actual words.
That had to have been a little bit unnerving.
Oh, I was really creeped out on that trip because like this was my first big outing in this whole adventure, like in the world of Bigfoot. It was my first time out in a very remote lake with a very sketchy vehicle that broke down like 2 weeks after I got home. I almost got stranded out there. And there was like a tropical storm that was blowing through as well. And so, yeah, that whole trip I was terrified. But I didn't notice anything coming into my camp or anything like that. Like it's just hearing weird things and like always wondering if I'm imagining it or my brain's like making stuff up.
I get a question from someone in the audience. Donna Lynn Siatka says, have you ever heard loud noises like a cry out by any animal?
On our recent expedition a couple weeks ago, we recorded a whooping call that was very prominent and everybody heard it, and it was, right in the area where it should have been coming from. And it's probably one of the best whooping calls that we have that we've recorded. So I'll be putting it in a video very soon, so everyone will be able to hear it.
Now you shoot a lot of video like out into the deep woods by yourself, and my hat's off to you. And that takes some pretty big cojones to go way deep out into the bush by yourself. Have you always done that, or is it just something you started doing for these documentaries?
So I went to college for adventure tourism and outdoor recreation, learning how to be a wilderness guide. And in that program, there were multiple times where we had to do solo trips. Just see if you could like handle being out in the bush. And our instructors were always like, you have to be tougher and stronger than any of your clients at all times because they are watching you and looking up to you for safety. And they would stress that. So from my like very early 20s, I was into solo trips, and also like organizing and coordinating big expeditions and campouts with multiple people is tricky nowadays. A lot of my friends are living in different areas, living different lives, and it's much easier for me, and I feel more comfortable on camera when I'm alone. And I'm used to doing solo trips. Like, of course it can get creepy, but you just got to be tough. Like, people did it every day thousands of years ago. I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things I enjoy most about your documentaries is it's just you and a camera out there. It's not, like certain television shows where it's 4 or 5 people in front of the camera with at least a dozen behind it. It's more real. And you have a very no nonsense approach. You don't put a lot of extraneous opinion in there. You just present it. And that's something I thoroughly enjoy about that. I'm really like your videos for that very reason.
Yeah. One thing I stress to people is to be okay with the possibility of being wrong about things in your Bigfoot research, or, like a lot of people don't want to admit that they're wrong. They want to act like they know everything as well about what they're doing and when they're filming themselves. And it's like, it is like a guy with the idea of like pulling the wool over people's eyes with like Bigfoot stuff on video. Like, it's very easy for somebody to do that, to mess around, to like deceive people and fool people if they wanted to, using like however they film it or how they edit it. Like, I don't know, like it's crazy. Like, you never know when you're watching somebody's videos what the truth actually is. You have to know that person. Like, you have to know them in real life to figure it out.
With this being the age of Photoshop and video shop, it's tough to take any video or photographic evidence at face value, simply because it's so easy to fake these days. CGI is getting really good. Now, granted, you can still watch a lot of movies where the CGI looks like it was done on an old Amiga, but there are still some examples of CGI that will almost fool you, and it's only getting better. So it's going to be, especially as the technology continues to improve, it's going to be harder and harder to accept any kind of video evidence as at face value. And there's going to be more and more people. Why have you brought in bones? Why haven't you brought in a body? But there's been so much, hair samples, scat samples, trackways, DNA samples collected. I don't really think we need to bring in a body to prove the existence of these creatures. I think there's enough evidence already that it should be making just about anybody question whether or not it's out there. I mean, heck, I can tell you from working in law enforcement, people have been sent to prison on eyewitness testimony. Why is eyewitness testimony good enough to put a guy in prison for life, but it's not good enough, to prove the existence of a creature? I mean, exactly. It'd be totally different. If 2 people came forward and said, "I saw a different species of tiger in the wild. We need to document this." The scientific community would be like, "Oh, well, a new species of tiger. We got to go check this out." But as soon as you start talking Bigfoot, everybody's like, "No, that can't be real. That's fake."
I think slowly, like, people are becoming more and more open to the idea, and I think a lot more professionals, like in the scientific community, are becoming more open to it. Especially like biologists that work for like forestry and the government. And up here in Canada, I've had interactions with biologists who are like very open and welcoming to the idea that we've had like stuff sent into us from people like that. Even like park rangers I've had reach out saying they've had weird encounters. It's like, I think eventually it'll be more accepted, and people will be more willing to look at all that evidence, like the hair evidence, the footprints, I mean, the vocalizations.
Right. Justin, do you think it's a fear of these biologists, zoologists, whoever, cryptozoologists, for fear of being ostracized?
I do.
I mean, because honestly, man, let's think, the truth makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you something. In my day-to-day life, I have a hard time like explaining what I do to people that I meet. And it worries me.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, these people are
Yeah, I
gonna
get
think
it.
I'm a crazy, stupid idiot, you know? Like,
Yeah, I get
but
it.
I have
I
to
get
try.
it. I
I have
get
to
it now,
try and
Justin.
sell it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy. Like for me, I just got done teaching a class, and I teach people, hey, here's raw scientific data that shows, hey, guess what? The more blood you have in your body, the better chance you have of living. But when that's a scientific fact, right? We can't refute that. But there's also in the cryptid community, there's irrefutable evidence that there's other species out there. But people are still so hesitant. Scientific experts are still so hesitant to even, address that or agree with that or say, hey, yeah, you know what? They're onto something because, yeah, there is something out there. And what's the reason for that?
Yeah, because of, I, you know what? It's like what DA said and I said, and I don't know if Justin will agree. If they ever came out and said this thing does exist, it would devastate the economy to no end.
Well, and also with like the missing 401 stuff, we were talking about David Paulides and everything, that goes back to something DA and I have talked about offline. Would that not involve government culpability?
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because oh no, it doesn't exist. I'm not doing the DA, the British scientist voice here, but oh no, it doesn't exist. Oh, it does. And that would make them culpable to all these people who are missing. And I think it's I don't know, man. It's just you can put that lipstick on a pig for only so long.
Right.
No, it's like the owl. What owl is that, DA, that they shut down?
The spotted owl.
The logging industry lost millions of dollars just because of that owl alone. When they found it.
It shut logging down in Oregon for years.
Yeah. So it's the same effect. Who wants to take their kids out camping and it's all over the news? By the way, there's a subspecies of human that runs around named Sasquatch. You're not going to take the kids out camping. Off. Right. You're not going to do it. Sometimes they're aggressive, sometimes they're not. So, yeah, I agree. It's going to affect you. It's going to affect the economy bad.
And like the other effects it would have just on people and on society in general, like knowing that another type of hominid is existing alongside us, it would, affect probably religion and written history and all kinds of stuff like that.
Exactly.
What is going on?
It's going to be an upheaval of a belief system that's been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah. And that's a big thing about the scientific community is they hate to accept anything that's going to set everything they've been basing their theories on for years on its ear. This could set not only the theories of evolution, but other scientific theories on their ear as well. It's going to have anthropologists arguing for decades once scientists say, okay, it's real. This is it. We need to deal with it. I think it's just a matter of time before that happens, but they're going to fight it every last inch.
Absolutely. And I'm going to use this as a small example, man. We were using tourniquets in the battlefield with great success from 2002 forward. It took 10 years for it even to be accepted in the National Registry of EMT curriculum. And during that time, how many thousands of people died because of there was adherence to institutional inertia. We've always been doing this way. And I think even though we've been using tourniquets in operating rooms since the 1800s with great success, how much of this institutional inertia, because, the scientists are like, well, we've always done it this way, So I think there's a lot of that too.
Even the point Justin made with the religion alone. We're all taught, I'm not getting religious, so please, everybody, don't blow up the comments. I'm Catholic, raised Catholic, Adam and Eve. that would actually devastate the Catholic, Vatican like crazy. So you're telling me this thing's running around and it's human? I mean, it's the same thing. Like I said, it's going to affect, like Justin said, it will affect, the economy and beliefs, and it's just like the UFO phenomenon. They're finally coming out with it now. You got pilots, Navy pilots, that are saying this now. They can't deny it. What else has to be done? What does Justin have to do? Get some, hey, here, I got a video of this thing taking an apple pie out of my hand. I mean, that's what, it's like,
still
what has to be
it.
done?
They still
No, and they wouldn't,
Well, if one does get discovered by someone, like 100% a body or a really great piece of footage, like the work all our groups are doing right now and all these organizations are doing is very important, even though it's not like professional scientific research. It's
Right.
amateur hour. But it's important because if one does come in, the biologists and the scientists are going to want to be going out there to do research, and the first people they're going to come to get information is people like us in groups.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
our groups.
Exactly.
Lorna Takach said, Justin, have you heard anything around the Yukon?
I don't know any specific stories in the Yukon. The closest I could tell you is the Nahani Valley in the Northwest Territories. We talked about that. So,
Leva Ramon says, how come one has never been turned in? What about skeletons?
these are questions that are almost impossible to answer because
I think that one actually has been answered. I mean, look at the giants of Lovelock Cave. Look at the examples of giant skeletons that have been unearthed here in Missouri. There were giant skeletons that were unearthed on the Aleutian Islands during World War II when they were leveling out ground for a runway. Every time these giant skeletons are unearthed, and in particular the Lovelock Cave incident, they were displayed in a museum in Nevada for years until the Smithsonian got a hold of them and they disappeared.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the photos from that cave of like the sandals and the artifacts that they found, but like how we don't really know exactly if those are even Sasquatch anyways. It
Correct.
Could be some other,
But anytime a large skeleton is turned in, it just mysteriously disappears.
Yeah, I don't know. Is this verified even? Like that these have been actually found?
The museum that had the skeletons from Lovelock Cave, the museum that had that still has the receipt where they were donated, where they were given to the museum, to the Smithsonian for study, and the Smithsonian claims they never got them.
That's interesting. My taxidermist buddy Ken Walker, he actually used to do work for the Smithsonian, and he would always say like, I wish I could have seen what kind of stuff they had locked away in there when I was working.
Oh, no kidding.
It would have been mind-blowing. I mean, there's probably more museums and institutions like that all over the continent that have stuff that they're probably never going to show.
Yeah, there's been so much stuff that has been found over the years. And, well, even the stories that came out of Mount St. Helens after the eruption of Bigfoot bodies being taken away by the government. Granted, those are pretty much unverifiable now, but the stories persist.
Yeah, that's true. That's like I recently had someone emailing me that saying that they were there when that happened. And like I can't back this up at all, even talking to the guy. Like anybody can email you and make up a story.
Correct.
Exactly.
And it's still just a story. Like you just got to put it on the shelf.
Well, another thing that people ask, where are the skeletons, where are the bodies? If this is an intelligent creature and it either buries or disposes of its own dead, I mean, what are the chances we're actually going to find one? The fossil record, they say it's like one out of every 10 million animals that even make it to a fossil. It's very difficult under very specific circumstances that bones become fossilized. How many times have you been out filming in the backwoods and you've come across a bear carcass?
Yeah, it doesn't happen. It very rarely happens.
Generally,
it's not impossible. But
yeah, it's not impossible. I know people that have found bear skeletons. It's just extremely rare. Generally, the thing is if anything dies in the deep woods, the scavengers come out of the woodwork and that skeleton's scattered in very, very short order. And then, of course, you've got animals that will eat the bone for the calcium. So, skeletons are generally, anything that dies in the woods generally goes back to nature pretty fast.
If I was like a person like hominid out there, like if I was a Sasquatch, and there was a family dynamic, like there was, a father, a mother, children, or whatever, grandparents. I wouldn't want to see the remains of one of my kin being picked apart by coyotes and all other kinds of animals.
Right.
So if you had like that level of intelligence and that, I guess, yeah, just a level of intelligence, like you wouldn't allow that to happen. You'd like dispose of the corpses in a way that might be like burial or whatever. Who knows? But I don't think they would just like leave the corpses of their kin out to be picked apart by animals.
I wouldn't think so. I would think they would either bury them or take them fairly deep into a cave. I know there have been a lot of accounts of finding remains, not necessarily of Bigfoot, but remains of other animals deep in caves. Most animals, when they know it's their time, they'll crawl way back into a cave or crawl back into the bushes where they're not going to be disturbed to die. It's not like they just drop dead in the middle of the woods. Animals die all the time, but most of the time, I mean, even like years ago when we would go looking for one of our dogs when we lived on the farm, if a dog was in near its time to die, it got someplace way back under something where it could die in peace. So even animals that aren't as intelligent as a higher primate generally tend to do their dying someplace where they're not going to be disturbed.
Yeah, when I'm like out and about in the city and I start feeling ill, the first thing I do is get back home as soon as possible and crawl into bed and hide myself. So
yeah, that's a pretty basic instinct right there. Or if it's bad enough, you go to a doctor. Most people don't just, I don't feel good, I'm going to curl up on the sidewalk and die right here.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day we'll find a body in a cave or something like that, but the odds are slim. Like there's probably still thousands and thousands of undiscovered caves and tunnels and things like that out there that are in inaccessible areas and maybe like just shrouded by foliage that have never been found, and there could be literally anything inside of them.
Well,
there could be prehistoric remains inside of them.
An animal that strong, if it really wanted to be left alone, could go into a small cave and roll a boulder. It's not going to be easily moved over the cave entrance behind it, and we'd come along and go, oh, it's just a big freaking rock, we're not going to be able to move it. So, it could easily have entombed itself, just, pulled a boulder in after it so it wouldn't be bothered. Things like that. Also, there was another point I was going to make. It completely escaped me. I hate it when I do that. It completely derailed my train of thought. If these creatures are that intelligent, and I would certainly give them at least primitive human level intelligence. They may not necessarily know the fundamentals of how a computer works or be able to log on the internet and check their email, but they certainly have a primitive intelligence, a survival level intelligence. Environmental intelligence. There we go. They're certainly intelligent enough to be able to survive well on their own. So given that as just a basic premise, these creatures would very much be intelligent enough to one, hide their dead, or to go someplace away from scavengers and predators to die.
Yeah, and they would also probably be observing indigenous people throughout the generations and, seeing what they're doing with their dead and getting ideas from that. And maybe it was similar cultures too. Yeah, between them and the indigenous people.
Well, no two Native American cultures have identical burial customs. There were some that buried on above ground little suspended platforms, while others had intricate burial details. It varied from tribe to tribe, and I don't think it's unreasonable to think it would be different with these creatures, because a lot of Native American lore basically discusses that these are just another tribe. The Cherokee refer to them as a big older brother. Whereas then you've got other tribes like the tribes up in the Pacific Northwest, where in the Cascade region, where they talked about them coming down out of the woods in the dead of night in the wintertime and stealing children and women. So, and I think that again that falls to the individual temperament. But there are tribes that very much talk about them as being just another tribe, while others report them to be very, very dangerous. So you never know. It's a kind of a crapshoot. So I would say it's definitely capable of burying its dead in intricate ways.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't it? If it's trying to remain hidden, if it respects its kin, like, you would bury it. Like, what else would you do?
Yeah,
they must.
There was one of our guests was talking about how they had seen pyres, obviously no bones on there, but pyres is like a memorial to them that obviously was not Native American in nature, but similar to. And that's where DA and I were talking, and Anthony and I were talking offline about, hey, if they're putting these things in caves, and like DA said, they're rolling boulders in. I think they do burial crypts, burial chambers, because they are sentient beings, and I think they do observe a tribal, or every tribe has customs. They have the customs and social mores that go along with their culture, and putting them in a cave, putting a stone up, whatever that we couldn't move, is one way to keep them hidden from our sight, from people who are going to plunder and I mean, look at the tombs in Egypt. What do we do to them? We plundered them. So yeah, I think that's a very valid point, possibly.
Well, then you've got the other end of the spectrum. What if they're cannibals?
Yeah. Maybe it depends on the tribe,
Very much could.
Yeah.
The thing is, we just don't know. Corey Cole asks, have you ever seen uprooted trees that have been turned upside down and jammed back into the ground?
I haven't seen them in person. There apparently used to be one at one of the research areas that's here in Alberta, but
they've been seen here in the Mark Twain National Forest in Missouri.
Interesting. Yeah, that's also something that I don't know what the legitimacy is of it. Like, easily could be done by logging equipment.
Well, in some of the places I've seen them, there's no trail. There's no way they could have gotten equipment in there.
Yeah, so stuff like that is that's something you can't really come to a conclusion on, really, unless you actually see it happening, or unless you maybe found some sort of hair evidence or footprint evidence around it.
Mondoc 40 in research says, what about the Lafleur County in southeast Oklahoma around Hanobia? The famous Choctaw Indian war against a clan of Bigfoot that had been abducting and killing their family members. That's a fascinating story. Are you familiar with it?
I did. I'm pretty sure I made a video about that where they came upon an area that was just like full of bodies. Mm-hmm. People had been going missing and whatnot. But the siege of how do you pronounce it? Hanobia? Hanabi?
That's the funny thing about Oklahoma, is words that look like they would be pronounced a specific way are very different in Oklahoma. The locals actually pronounce that Hanabi. Don't know why.
Okay, I made a video about it. I don't know how I pronounced it in the video, but that's a crazy story.
It is an awesome story.
That's an intense situation of having these creatures coming up to your house, having your property being surrounded, and having a bunch of scared BFRO researchers show up, not knowing what to do.
The siege at Hanobia, that story, I firmly believe that actually happened because I won't say the name. I can't say it on the air because I promised the guy, but I know one of the family members involved, and I firmly believe him.
So that's the thing, when you meet somebody who you trust like that, who fully believes that they've seen something, you're like, how could this not be real?
Right. And he's been dealing with this for a long time, and I tried like hell to get him to come on the show and talk about it. He's like, brother, you can talk about it anytime you want. I'll give you information, but people have been calling me a liar for 20 plus years, and I'm just tired of dealing with the story. He said, if you want to write a book about it, knock yourself out. I'll give you any information you want, but I'm not going to be part of it. I am just so tired of people calling me a liar and everything under the sun. I just don't want anything to do with the public eye on it. I mean, and I totally get it. I mean, people have been pretty much trying to call him out and tell him he's making the story up and it's BS. And I've seen the look of fear on the guy's face when he talks about it. It's not something that I believe he made up. I mean, I've taken classes on how to interrogate people, and I can pretty much spot when somebody's lying to me, and I don't think he's lying. You don't fake that kind of visceral response.
You can just feel it usually when you're talking to somebody. It's not like all sight. Like you can tell. Like you can kind of sense it when somebody is terrified and scared and has had a traumatic experience. It's not really that hard to detect.
Yeah, and there are verbal cues that people will give you when they're being deceptive. And I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I've spotted those verbal cues in some people that I think were just pulling my leg, telling me a story. But then there are others that you can see them stop and check their hands, or you can see the goosebumps on their arms. And this person isn't trying to pull the wool over your eyes. They are legitimately scared.
Yeah.
And I've had a few people that like at deer camp when we used to go deer hunting as groups. They're like, "Dude, I will tell you this story, but I am not going to tell you this story in the woods. I am going to scare myself to death. I will not tell this story when we're not comfortably in a house somewhere." And I've talked to for years. I went to training when I was a cop, and we would go to other locations and train with other departments and stuff. And I would always make friends with people. And then of course inevitably I would, especially some of the rural counties, I would ask them, "Hey, you got any Bigfoot stories?" And I've gotten some really good ones from guys that are still cops that said, "Hey, I'll give you this story, but don't you ever mention my name until I'm retired," because they don't want their credibility ruined on a witness stand. And these are guys that had nothing to gain by coming forward and telling me this story. And I know two guys in particular that after they had their incident, it wasn't long before they quit being cops, because they said, "There's not a chance in hell I'm going to run into another one of these things on a call. I'm just done with it." And one of them, actually, who was a lifelong deer hunter, sold his deer rifles. He said, "I won't step foot in the woods again unless I've got a small army with me."
When you see something so unexplainable and so weird that you shouldn't be seeing, that shouldn't be there, like you do get that feeling of, I need to tell someone about this. Right. This is crazy. But then nobody is going to believe me. So what do? You probably become desperate trying to find somebody to tell your story to. So they'll come to people like you or like me or like Doc or, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're the only people that understand.
I talked to one guy at a training conference, and he goes, "Are you just going to make fun of me like everybody else?" I said, "No, I promise I'm not going to make fun of you." He said, "All right, let's go sit down. Go to your soda and we'll talk." So we went away from the group and sat down, and I bought the guy a Coke. And he starts telling me this story. And I could see he was still, even after a few years later, that he was still visibly shook when telling the story. Mm-hmm. Apparently, he went out deer hunting and dozed off in his deer stand and woke up with something tugging at him. And he opened his eyes and looked down, and there was one right at the base of his deer stand. He said, "I was 10 feet off the ground, and its head was level with my feet." He said, "It was pulling on my lunchbox." I said, "What'd you do?" He said, "I gave it the damn lunchbox is what I did." I said, "Well, what'd you do after that?" He goes, "I got down out of that deer stand, left the damn thing there, and walked out of the woods, and I haven't been back." He said, "If you want the deer stand, I'll tell you where it's at, but I'm not going back."
That's interesting. A lot of stories of people never wanting to go back into the wilderness, which is crazy. A lot of people love going out to the wilderness to escape. You have beautiful nature around you. And usually, for the most part, it's quite peaceful. And it's like lovely to be out in the mountains. So to have the feeling inside of you to never, ever want to go back there, it must have been something very traumatic.
Absolutely. And it's a paradigm shift for a lot of people. Some people have that experience, and it just completely changes their worldview, because suddenly, when you were a kid telling your parents there was a monster in your bed and they said their monsters aren't real, and you realize they are, it changes everything. It's a terrifying thing. And to me, when I had my experiences, it it struck me in a totally different direction. Instead of being too afraid to go back out there, I wanted answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just depends what kind of person you are.
Yeah.
If you're a curious type, if you are an adventurous type, you might want to, like, for me, I've seen a lot of weird stuff in the sky, and I'm like, I have to try and see this stuff again. Like UFO phenomena and whatnot. That kind of stuff to me is stuff that, like, I would love to see, like, another UFO.
Yeah.
Because it was so mind-blowing and so, it sounds weird to say life-changing, but it is kind of life-changing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that, because it changes, like, your beliefs.
It's a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
My mother used to tell me when I was a kid that I would blunder in where angels feared to tread, and that was kind of the motif for my entire life. I mean, even as a cop, I never wanted to be the second guy through the door. I always wanted to be the first one. And has it gotten me in trouble? Yeah, a number of times. It's got me, in over my head a few times, but it's just kind of been the hallmark of my life. I never wanted to be the second guy. I always wanted to find out. I was always charging in when other people were heading the other direction. Same thing with you being a firefighter. I mean, it takes a very special type of person to be able to go into an inferno when everybody else is screaming like a 12-year-old kid and running out the door.
I mean, yeah, like, all I can say is there are different breeds of people, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That have, like, some people have more courage and confidence than others, and are more risk takers, I guess. And I don't know, like, people are going to react differently to all this kind of stuff.
People always react, and there's no two people react the same to anything. And lots of people will say, "Oh, if this happened, this is what I would do." And it's easy to say that until you're faced with that situation. I mean, anybody can say, if I hear gunshots, I'm going to run toward it. But until you've got rounds whizzing over your head, it's a whole different animal. And it's easy to say this is how I would react until you're actually faced with that situation and you have to react to that. I've seen grown men turn to gelatin when guys I thought were basically invincible, 12 feet tall and bulletproof, turned to gelatin when the shit hit the fan. By the same token, I've seen guys that weighed $105 soaking wet turn into the most terrible force you've ever imagined when shit got real, because that's just how they were wired. Same thing with when it comes to cryptids. Not everybody's going to be able to have an experience and go back to want that second experience. It's a whole different animal, and it's one of those things that's easy to say, well, this is what I would do, but when the rubber meets the road, it's a whole different animal.
Yeah. Fortune favors the bold, so just got to keep going back.
Very much so. And that's one of the things I like the most about your videos is, despite the fact that you've been in some of the deepest, thickest woods I've ever seen in my life, and I've been to some pretty deep sections of areas all over the Midwest and even all over the West Coast. You've been in some thick, deep brush. And to just keep going back, I admire that, because it takes a special kind of person to be able to go into the places you go and film. And that's why I enjoy your documentaries so much, is because they're visceral, they're real. They're not just someone who, has carefully placed the camera so it's not getting the house in the frame and shooting into the woods and saying they're in the deep woods. You are legitimately miles from the nearest road.
But yeah, like in my personal life, I enjoy hiking, and that has been an activity that I've been into since I was a kid. So I enjoy just doing long hikes. So trekking deep into the woods has always been something that I've been comfortable with. And like going to school for adventure tourism and wilderness guiding, like, you get pretty comfortable out in the bush by yourself really fast and for extended periods of time as well. And, I don't know, when you're journeying off into the woods, 25 kilometers, that's what you're doing. There's no, like you don't have to fake it. I don't know. Like, I want to actually find Sasquatch, so I don't want to fake anything. I want to be up where they should be, And
that's something else I like about your videos is you present it the way it is. You're not out trying to make something out of nothing. There's far too many of those images floating around the internet where they'll take a picture of a bush and circle 4 or 5 spots and claim that they're Bigfoot in those photos. There's way too many of those floating around, and I'm not trying to call anybody out because we've all seen those photos. It's just, again, there's just too many of them. But you just present it as what it is, and the fact that you're way out there in the middle of nowhere shooting these documentaries and talking about these stories, to me, is just it's real. It's a connection with places that most people will never go in their lifetime.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to film it more as like an adventure kind of show than specifically like a Bigfoot show. So it's kind of a wilderness adventure, but looking for Bigfoot. Like I like to get all the scenery and to just film what happens. And if nothing happens, nothing happens, whatever. It's an adventure out into the bush looking for something that's not supposed to exist. That's the entertainment value in it. It's not the, like what was that? What was the sound over there? I just like the adventure and the possibility that maybe out on this trip we might find something. And that possibility is always there.
Well, I hope everybody that's listening tonight goes over and hits that like and subscribe button for your channel, because you've got some fantastic if I could speak English tonight, you have some fantastic documentaries, especially your Expedition Sasquatch videos. Those are just fantastic.
Thank you.
The cinematography is good. You've got a really good eye for filming some of these locations. And again, you just present it matter-of-factly, which I wish more people would do. I do try to do the same thing whenever I go out and shoot videos. Granted, I'm not going as deep out in the track as you do. There was a time I did, but now that I'm dealing with a back injury, I don't get as far off the trail as I would like. But the thing is you just present it for what it is, and there's far too much sensationalism and too many people trying to make a quick buck in the cryptid world today. And I think that's really a part of what's causing a lot of the schisms in it, is because you got people that argue about the woo. You got people that argue about, well, you didn't get a clear enough picture, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. It's just semantics. People want to argue over something that we haven't even proven exists in the first place.
The key to it, if you're a researcher, is to just take it and don't say anything and just ignore it.
I totally agree. And we've all got our detractors. I mean, I get negative comments on some of my videos, and I've gotten messages from people like, "Oh, well, you're full of crap," blah blah blah, and it just happens. I don't respond to those. I just ignore them and move on. Just definitely keep doing what you're doing, and I hope, again, everybody goes out and likes and subscribes to your videos, because they are just really awesome.
Thank you so much.
So you said you've got more plans for doing more of the Expedition Sasquatch series. What's the next area?
I'm going to continue going out to these same areas. I have a few different areas that are really great, and I'm just going to be hitting all these different areas over and over again. And they are all really great areas. And one of them is that habituation site with the tree structures. Very well-known area. And then a valley where I've been filming a few videos that I'm doing a 2-week expedition in with a Land Rover that I have, and which I was supposed to film a long time ago, but I planned it during the pandemic, and it kind of got complicated a bit. So now everything's good to go for that, and
it threw a lot of us into a tailspin for a while.
Yeah, and then I'm doing the Sasquatch: A Legend Meets Science 2 documentary special for, I don't know what network it's going to be on yet exactly, but it's
the first one was fantastic, so I can't wait for the second one.
Yeah, so I'm working on that with Doug Hychek. He's the producer, the creator of Monster Quest on History. Yeah,
we've had Doug on the show a couple of times. Doug's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, and he's definitely the guy you want if you have evidence. You know, he's the guy to go to. So it's going to be a very interesting project, and I'm very excited to see how it all pans out and to see how the analysis of all the evidence goes, because there's a lot of evidence that we have that, you know, there's going to be stuff in the film that's never been seen before, and that, you know, experiments that have never been done before. It's all, a lot of it's all new stuff. So it's going to be very interesting.
Now, you said new stuff that's never been done before. Can you give us a hint at any of that, or you don't want to reveal it yet?
I can't reveal anything.
Okay, no problem. I was just fishing for a little detail. I can't blame you there. Now, going back to the tree structures, the one TP structure that you showed where they had been broken off and you couldn't find the stumps, how much would you estimate those trees weighed?
I don't know, a lot, like a few hundred pounds, like a lot.
So it wasn't something that somebody just threw over their shoulder and carried for a quarter mile through the woods.
No, they were like full-size trees almost. Like, they weren't huge, but they were like heavy enough to be very challenging for someone to do something like that. Now, if you had a group of people and, like I said before, like ropes or some sort of pulley system maybe or something, like, you could probably make something if you really put your mind to it. You could probably make something like that, you know, because, you know, Stonehenge was made. And, like,
right.
It's possible. Yeah, the pyramids. It can't be proven, and now it can't even be analyzed because it's on the ground. All we have now is the video and clips of that structure, the photographs and everything. Yeah, it's gone.
Well, my wife is a big skeptic. She's always the sounding board when I find something I want to show to somebody. I show it to her, and if she's like, I don't know, that's a piece of crap, I tend to listen to her because she's got a pretty good instinct for things like that. But when I showed her that video of that particular structure, even she was like, well, I know people can make things like that, but considering there were no stumps in the area where those came from and how far off the beaten path he was, why would somebody hoax that? And
that structure is not very far off the beaten path. There's an actual like dirt road that leads to that, right to that area, basically. That structure, though, I can't see how it could have happened naturally.
Yeah.
It had to have either been people or Sasquatch.
Well, considering the size of those logs, unless they were using some sort of block and tackle, I can't see how they hoisted those in place because they were woven in pretty tightly.
Yeah. That's one of the most well-known tree structures ever to be documented in the world of Bigfoot.
Well, even though it was close to a road, that road is not exactly, you know, a major highway. That's a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. I mean, what are the odds somebody drove way down there just to hoax the 2 or 3 people a year that come down there?
Yeah, I don't know. And the thing is, I don't know how long those structures had actually been there. I don't know when they were first discovered. They could have been there for a long time. But it is a road that is, you know, off a main logging road that's off of it takes a while to get to that spot, and it is quite the drive, and it sucks getting there.
Well, like you're saying, hoaxers tend to be pretty lazy. If they were going to put a tree structure where where it would be seen to be considered, you know, where people would think, oh, this is Bigfoot, they would put it where there's a lot of traffic. Considering how far down and I use the term off the beaten path, but there was a road nearby, but it's not a road that is, you know, saw a lot of traffic. If people were going to hoax something, they would put it where a lot more people would see it.
Yeah, and so they wouldn't have to spend so much gas money. You know, gas prices are so crazy. They're not going to drive all the way out there.
That's pretty far out. Now, you mentioned earlier that during that bluff charge, you guys found trackways. How many times have you come across trackways in the backwoods?
That trackway that went through that guy's yard was like the longest trackway I've ever seen. Like it went through his whole yard. So that was really cool to see. But there had been a few other occasions where I had found what looked like footprints. The first time I found tracks was when I was filming Wildman, My Search for Sasquatch, which was my first film. And we were out not too far away from where this tree structure site is. And the first night we were there, probably at around midnight, we were all sitting around the campfire, just hanging out as friends. We weren't even filming anything at that moment. And then we heard it sounded like a tree falling very close to where we were in the bushes, like next to our camp. So we're thinking like, man, what are the chances that the one tree that falls down in the woods has fallen down right here? And we were also thinking about Bigfoot, because we were making a Bigfoot documentary. But the next morning when it was daylight, we had walked off into that direction where we heard the tree falling, and we had found these prints in the moss that looked like juvenile Sasquatch prints. And they're weird. They had toes.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, there's been a few times like that. And a lot of times it's just like, man, I am looking at footprints in a place where there shouldn't be a naked person running around. and they look strange. They don't look like anything else, like especially the juvenile ones. They look substantially different than an adult Sasquatch track, with like splayed out toes at the top and quite a bit narrower, obviously, and just smaller in size overall, but they kind of have a different shape to them.
I find that the Trackways fascinating, especially when you start looking at some of the ones like Dr. Meldrum has found, like the one that had the deformed foot. When they start talking about the mid-tarsal break and the morphology of the Trackways, I think it's amazing that some of these tracks have been found so far in the deep woods that the chances of somebody with an advanced anatomy of primate foot morphology going out into the hinterlands to try to leave this trackway in the hopes that someone finds it, I think the odds of that happening are, you got a better chance of winning the Powerball lottery while getting struck by lightning.
Yeah, for sure. Like you'll find people find tracks in areas that are like, who would be out here? Like a guy that was at our expedition the other week, he brought some track casts that he had casted in an area where it was like early spring, like there was ice and snow everywhere, but there were a few melty spots. There was just like mud and kind of water, but there was a trackway that went through the mud and the ice and everything. It's like, who is walking out here? They look like juvenile tracks. They were smaller. We're like, what kind of kid is walking out here with no shoes on in the middle of nowhere? It's like icy and muddy, like, and it was just one track. It's very strange and very unusual. There shouldn't be tracks like that there.
A little over a week ago, I was down in Fouke, Arkansas, where the Legend of Boggy Creek was filmed, and I got some pictures of the tracks that they had, and it just amazes me at the different types of tracks. And these are not just, something that you find anywhere. I mean, these are amazing trackways, and that they're finding similar tracks all over North America, and even places like Australia, where they've got the Yowie, and in Asia where they've got the Yeren, the Yeti, the Almasti, the Alma. That tracks like this are cropping up all over the planet. That to me just says the odds of this being fake are so astronomically low. And when you've got these trackways showing up literally all over the planet, I don't understand how so many people can go, oh, that's nothing. It's a hoax. It's made up.
Yeah, I was sitting through Jeff Meldrum's, I think it was the 50th anniversary presentation he was doing of the Patterson footage. But he was talking about how when he went to China to do research on the Yeren, they found tracks that were nearly identical to the Paddy tracks. Nearly identical, which is very weird. How is that possible? And then you think about, like, well, a lot of people speculate that, this creature might have, originated in like China, where the Gigantopithecus, the Gigantopithecus fossils have been found, and where the teeth have been found in the apothecary shop, and
well,
it is weird.
The scientific community has accepted that Gigantopithecus exists, yet all of the fossil records we have ever found were a few teeth and a piece of a jawbone. But that's enough to prove this creature existed. Yet we've got thousands of tracks thousands upon thousands of eyewitness reports, DNA samples that have been taken, scat samples, hair samples. How is that not enough to make people accept the possibility of Bigfoot exists? I mean, even Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Dr. Jane Goodall, we've got some major people in the scientific community that believe that this creature is out there. Yet you've still got, in any given time, you can mention Bigfoot in a conversation in a social setting, and 90% of the people are going to look at you like you just grew a third arm out of your neck.
Yeah, I know. Well, the easiest way to explain it is maybe there is a conspiracy going on. Information being hidden.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to repress it for whatever reason we can't understand. Justin, I had a question for you, man. For the juvenile tracks, did you notice any adult tracks there as well? And did y'all get a measurement of length and width and depth of these tracks?
I can't remember what I said in the video, but I look at them in the video. I think I said they were like 12 or 13 inches or something like that.
Okay.
They weren't like giant Sasquatch tracks, but they were still quite a bit longer than our boots. You can watch it in the video.
Okay. I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Every time I've ever gone out, the crazy thing is if I take stuff to make casting materials, I don't find anything. But the times I've forgotten to pack the casting material is the time I always find an impression.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's Murphy's
So
Law.
what do you do? What do you do then? Do you not bring it and then have a satellite phone and tell your friends to bring it in?
Yeah, basically. I try to get pictures as best I can. Throw something into the photo for scale reference. But the problem with pictures, and when you're trying to get pictures of a track, unless it's like in fresh sand, the pictures never turn out to. You never see exactly what you're seeing with your naked eye, and that's the weird thing with taking pictures is I can go out in my backyard right now, and there's still a decent amount of daylight, and I can take a picture with my phone of my dog 20 feet away. And he looks fine to the naked eye, but he looks a little bitty tiny on the screen, and you can't even make out enough detail to tell it's a dog. That's the hard part about photographs is they never really capture the visual perspective, even though that's what they're supposed to do. They never really fully capture what you're seeing with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's really good with like lighting and stuff, and they can set up certain lights to make more like contrast and whatnot, like it makes it better. And video is always better because you can move the camera around and it kind of makes it pop a little bit more. But yeah, it is really hard to photograph tracks in a way that represents it the way you had seen it in real life, you know. And then when you show that to people, it's
depth to it just doesn't show up.
I know, and then you show the picture to people, and they're like, "I don't know, I don't really see it." It's like, who's there?
My thing is, if I've got to trace the image, I'm not even going to show the picture. It's just a waste of time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you kind of got to pick and choose what you put out there.
Unfortunately, we've all seen those blob squatch and blob man photos that they say they'll say, oh, there's two in this picture, and you're like standing on your side and squinting and you still don't see it. I'm not pointing anybody out. I'm not singling anybody out or trying to say anything negative about anybody, but I've seen too many of those photos, and that's exactly why I don't share a lot of photos that I take, because unless there's something clear in the image, unless I know for a fact there's something there, I don't even share the picture because it's just impossible to tell. And there's pictures are subjective. No two people are going to see the same thing, and unless you've got something clear in that image that jumps out at people, you're going to get people arguing for and against for it all over the board. So I don't even share pictures like that.
Yeah, you got to pick and choose what you put out there, but then like some people just want to get the views and the shares and the things, so they'll put it out there anyways. They don't really care. But it just kind of pollutes the social media space, you know.
I agree. So what are your thoughts and your opinion on the Patterson-Gimlin film? I know that's kind of a divisive subject with a lot of people. What do you think of it?
I think it's real.
I do too.
I do think it's real, and because like I'm a guy who can't tell you that I think Bigfoot is real, which is weird because I haven't seen it, but something in me, and after listening to Meldrum's presentation on that and how he presents it, I'm like, I don't think it could be anything else other than a real Sasquatch.
I agree.
If a person can go on YouTube and find that presentation, have a listen, and you will probably be convinced. If you can find that presentation in its entirety, listen to it, because it's really good. And then the Astonishing Legends podcast, they did like a 6-part series on the Patterson-Gimlin film, and they did a lot of research, and it's probably one of the best presentations on that film that I've ever seen. So
what was that podcast called again?
Astonishing Legends.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You got a question from the audience. Michelle Burns says, "Do you think that they actually killed the whole family after the filming?"
No, I don't. I don't. I think that's silly. I'm just being honest.
I know there are a lot of people coming down on that argument, one side and the other. I personally think they filmed a creature. I also think that by the fact that it allowed them to see it, and the way it moved slowly enough and kept looking at them to make sure they were watching it, I think it was protecting young. I think there were young ones hidden nearby that it was drawing attention away from by drawing attention to itself. I think that's why they got such a clear footage, because it was trying to get them to follow it instead of where they had young ones hidden. But I don't.
It would make sense. It would make sense because its behavior is weird. Like, why would it stay out in the open like that and walk in a direction where it'd be out in the open? Why wouldn't it just go straight into the trees?
Yeah, and when it easily, considering how fast these things have been reported to move, especially if they drop down and use their hands, go on all fours, like using their knuckles like a gorilla, considering how fast they've been reported to move, I think it could have easily gotten away from them without them ever seeing it. There's no way it didn't hear them coming, because horses aren't exactly stealthy.
Right.
So I think it was drawing them away intentionally. I think there were young nearby, at least one young one. But again, I don't think there's enough credible information to say that there was a family slaughtered.
Yeah, I think that was just made up, to be 100% honest with you.
I agree with that. Yeah, 100%.
I'm glad that you and I are kind of in agreement on that. I think the Patterson-Gimlin is still the smoking gun. I think it's the best footage we've ever seen, and there have been a lot of footage out there that have been put out. Largely, most of it debunked. But I think the two best pieces of photograph or video evidence that I've seen is the Patterson-Gimlin footage and the footage that those loggers captured when that one chucked the tree like a spear, and that massive tree flew like 60 yards.
Those were oil field workers here in Alberta.
Yeah, there's no way a person did that. I mean, that tree was just too big for a person to have thrown that thing like a javelin.
Yeah, I've always thought that video was probably real.
I think it is as well.
We had been trying to track down those people to talk to them, but it just never worked out. We could never locate them, unfortunately. So I don't know, like, if they put that video out there, I don't think they made any money off of it or anything like that. Like,
no, I don't think they did as well.
I think it was just something very weird that happened, and they posted it online.
Mm-hmm. Well, even looking at the video, it's not clear enough to see exactly what it is that throws it, but I can tell you for a fact there's no grizzly bear that's going to chuck a tree like that. And that takes hands.
Exactly, yeah. It takes hands, and it takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, a tremendous amount of strength to throw. Even if that tree was 10 feet long, as opposed to, they estimated to be 30, 35 feet long. Even if it was 10 feet long, it's still more than I could chuck more than 10 yards.
Yeah.
Unless it was a Hollywood movie prop tree made out of styrofoam.
And even then, styrofoam doesn't tend to fly well.
That is true. That is true. Who knows?
I remember when they used to sell those big styrofoam planes that you could put together. Yeah, those didn't fly well.
Nope.
Styrofoam just doesn't fly aerodynamically.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what? I don't know. Like, something like that, you might not find out because people could, like, they might just not want the attention anymore.
Since you mentioned that you were working with Doug Hychek, have you ever thought about going up to that Snell Grove location where they filmed?
Oh, I've thought about it. I could probably go out there one day for sure. Like,
I think
he's
that'd be
probably
a
got all kinds
fantastic
of
location
connections.
for you to film.
That would be very interesting to go back there.
I think that area, since it's so far and so inaccessible, I think that would be the perfect spot for you to shoot in your next expedition, Sasquatch.
I mean, it would be. I'm probably not going to leave Alberta for a while, but I will definitely, like, that's a place that is on the list of places that I would like to check out for sure, because it seems like there was actual genuine activity going on.
Yeah, and Doug said a lot more happened off camera than happened on.
Yeah, and also, like, because that's in Ontario, and actually Doug himself had found a trackway way up north, north of that area, like along an ocean beach. They found a massive trackway, and that's kind of what got him into the subject of Bigfoot. He's like, there's something to this. We're in the middle of nowhere, on a beach in the middle of nowhere. It's probably like polar bears everywhere.
Well, that's
a big Sasquatch trackway going down the beach.
Right. Well, the Snell Grove location is what got Doug and I talking about some of the vocalizations he heard up there. And he brought up that some of it sounded very much like Mongolian throat singing. He said, but then there was another type of vocalization that he heard that almost sounded like music, like it was singing. And I asked him if he'd ever heard Norwegian calling, how the Vikings used to call cattle home. How they would make calls that would sound all the way down the fjord and sound miles up into the hills, how they would be able to communicate over long distances. And he'd said he'd never heard of it. But once he looked it up, I sent him a couple links. He said, that is almost exactly what I heard coming from the woods. He said it wasn't really words. It was like a melodic singing. And I found that really fascinating, that something from Viking history was very much like what he heard at Snell Grove. And it's another reason I want to go to Snell Grove. I want to go up there and spend a week and just, record. I mean, I've got some parabolic mics and things like that I would like to go up there and just try to get as much audio as I could. But I think some of the audios that have been captured are just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, could you imagine if they did that to, like, bring in other wildlife, like deer, stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
They calls like that, and then they just kill them.
Oh, yeah. It's a brilliant hunting strategy. I mean, I've seen videos. There was one I just saw recently where the sound of a crying infant brought a deer running. A deer come running to see what it was. And it seems really odd that sometimes people have described hearing what they thought was a Sasquatch, but it was mimicking the sound of a human infant or an infant crying. So all these different cries could have not only hunting aspects, but could have communication aspects as well.
If you were out in the middle of the woods by yourself and you started hearing a baby crying, would you go investigate it?
Me personally,
if you were a good person, I know, but if you were like a person, Mr. like Joe Blow or whoever, like, you'd probably be like, oh my God, there's a baby out here somewhere. Go save it. And then you get taken. Yeah.
You become a missing 411 case. I know if I'm out in the deep woods and I hear a baby crying, I'm going to go, would you look at the time? It is time to go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that. I don't know. People like us, we're aware that this is this might be Sasquatch activity, so we can get away with leaving it alone and just running away.
What kind of vocalizations have you heard?
Well, I heard a whoop like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, the whoops are fascinating because they could mean so many different things. But you get the people say they heard what sounded like the quote unquote 400-pound owl, and then you said the one that bluff charged you made a sound like a horse. It's those weird calls that fascinate me.
Yeah, and like I said, like I heard what I thought sounded like people talking. I have an audio recording that's very, very long that was sent in to me it was recorded over a May-long weekend, like a few years ago. I think it was back in 2017 or 18. But it is off in the distance, and it sounds like a dinosaur. Like it sounds like a T-Rex or something. Not saying I know what a T-Rex sounds like, but
Yeah.
whatever you
Like
would
the
imagine
Jurassic
it
Park
sounds
sound.
Yeah, and it is very like guttural, and it's terrifying. It doesn't sound like anything else I have heard out in the wilderness. And it was kind of in that early season, like I talked about too. It was right in that perfect time in an area where there have been lots of reports and lots of strange activity. I think it might be real, a genuine
Could have
report.
been my ex-wife. You never know.
It probably was.
You know,
I know
Or
one
it
time
could have
out in
been-
Mark Twain, we were
it could have
deer
been
hunting.
werewolves.
One time out in the Mark Twain National Forest, I was deer hunting with some friends, and we heard something that I tried to record, but this was back in the late 80s, and all I had was a tape recorder, and it didn't pick up a thing. Those of us that remember old tape decks are dating ourselves, and that's primitive technology we won't see again. There's no such thing as digital recorders or really good microphones. They were all pretty crappy, but we heard this sound that almost sounded like. Have you heard the Ohio howl? The recording of the Ohio howl? It sounded very similar to that, but it just kept like repeating like a storm call, like a siren, and it went on for about 10 minutes. And I didn't hear it at first. One of my buddies did. A guy I used to deer hunt with named Rick, and he's like, shh, 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 shh. What the hell is that? And we all started listening. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And that's when I tried to record it, and it just didn't come out. But it went on for about 10 minutes.
That's crazy. Yeah, I don't know what that would be. There was one time back in college, we were on a cross-country ski expedition in a massive wilderness area. It was all like frozen lakes in the winter and forest everywhere. It was an amazing trip. We were out for about a week, but about halfway through that trip, we were camped out on this little island. And it was around dinner time. It was already dark out in the winter, obviously. And we started hearing these like wood knocking sounds. And this is like before I really started getting into the subject, right? This is probably back in like 2000, I want to say 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I had said to my classmates, I said like, yeah, this is like a Bigfoot thing. Like they're supposed to make these wood knocking calls. I said, I bet you if we wait a little bit longer, we'll hear a few knocks from the opposite direction. And I was kind of like joking and just being stupid. But sure enough, we actually heard 3 knocks come from the other direction. And it was like, holy crap, like, is this actually something? But back then I wasn't as into it. Like, like,
what do you think the 3 knocks mean?
I don't know. It's some sort of signal to tell you, oh, someone's around, tell the others someone's around, maybe there's danger. It could be an assortment of things, different patterns of knocks might mean certain things. This is, how are we going to ever know?
Do you think it's actually wood on wood sound, or do you think they're making it with their mouth? I know Doug Hychek and I were talking about that, and he thinks they very well may be doing it like making some sort of call with their tongue.
So Ken Walker, he can make a really good wood knocking sound with his mouth while clapping his hands. And it sounds like wood on wood. It's very strange.
I can make a very loud noise with my tongue that can be heard for quite some distance.
Yeah, but I feel like it would just depend on how far they want the sound to travel.
Mm-hmm.
It would dictate what method they would use.
So you think they use both?
Probably. Like, they do stuff with sticks. They pick up sticks and build structure. Why wouldn't a Sasquatch ever bang a stick against a tree?
Good point.
People do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is all speculate. Like, this is stuff I don't know.
I've never done wood knocks. I've thought about it a number of times, but I've never done it because I figure with my luck, I'm going to make wood knocks, and all I'm going to be communicating with is a guy, a mile away on another campsite.
You're going to make wood knocking sounds probably to obviously to somebody that would be listening, that would get the signal. If it's kind of like a Morse code signal or something like that. Mm-hmm. Unless you're making tree knocks and banging sticks together to just try and scare someone away.
There was one account I read about wood knocks that stuck in my head. And people that talk about how sometimes they're groups of 3, they're groups of 4. But one account that I read, he said he made like rapid fire, multiple, like 10 in a row, like tunk, 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 and it provoked an aggressive response. And I've always kept that in mind, because the last thing I want to do is piss something off. I don't want to provoke an aggressive response. I think the only way I would intentionally do that is if I was trying to draw it away from somebody else. But I always found that fascinating, that a rapid fire call provoked an aggressive response, and I think that's very indicative of the fact that we don't know what they mean. The same reason I don't do call blasting or try to make my own calls is because if you look at the Sierra sounds that Ron Moorhead recorded, when they had the cryptolinguist from the Navy, I'd analyzed those sounds. There were characteristics of the sound that were both above and below what humans are capable of making. So if I go out and I make a call, it's basically going to be like trying to listen to the London Symphony Orchestra on one headphone. There's going to be aspects of that are completely lacking. So I don't think we're capable of making a sound.
I think Sasquatch have the intelligence to know that we don't know what the heck we're doing making these calls. They're probably like, wow, these people are dumb. And I don't think I don't think they believe that we're making calls to initiate an aggressive response. But like you said, I mean, if one did have an aggressive response, who knows what the deal is.
Yeah.
But I feel like they have the intelligence to understand what kind of crap we're trying to pull out there in the bush, trying to lure them in.
Yeah.
You know?
I kind of sometimes I think that we're more entertaining than anything else, that they find us interesting because we don't know what we're doing, and we try to make these calls. They're like, did you hear what that guy said? Yeah.
So, I mean, we probably are very entertaining, and they probably just like watching us and learning from us. I always wondered that, like, maybe they learn behaviors from watching people too, which is something weird to think about. We think of them as like they're the strong, powerful beast of the forest, and they are just the owners of everything out there. But I wonder if there's a part of them that is curious and like they pick up on things and learn behaviors similar to how like a child would, you know, or a pet or something like that. I wonder if there's like an innocence to them like that. Maybe somebody initiates some sort of weird behavior out in the bush and the Sasquatch see it, and then they pick up on it. You know, maybe an aggressive behavior or a bad behavior of some kind.
Well, you also get a lot of those accounts of people that live out in the deep woods and talk about having aggressive slaps on the side of their house, and you know, activity increasing when their wife is present or their daughter's present. And those, I always find those stories a little interesting, because it almost seems to me like when they're slapping on the side of the house, it's almost like they're trying to draw people out. It's not like they couldn't get in if they wanted to.
Yeah, it could be for that. It could be just to scare people. It could be just to mess with people. Like, it might be an enjoyable thing to do that.
You don't have TV. You got to do something to entertain yourself.
Yeah. So the thing is, we won't really ever know why they do any of these things until we can find a way to actually have a conversation with one.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And we'll probably never find out.
Well, if they're as intelligent as we think they are, they've got to have a complex language, even if it's a language we can't discern. I mean, they're discovering now that chimps have some sort of rudimentary language that we weren't previously aware of. These are animals that are, you know, it's about as close to human as you can get. I mean, genetically, they're like less than 3% away from our DNA. So, you know, if these animals are on the pongid or the great ape spectrum, they're definitely capable of high enough intelligence where they could have a complex language, even if it's one we don't recognize.
Yeah, they would have to. They have a very complex like social structure in the way they are organized. They're like a tribe, and they, you know, are militant as well. They have to have a complex form of communication of some kind to be able to, you know, coordinate all that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know.
In your documentaries, you always, like I said, you present the information just kind of, here it is. And it's one of the things I like about the Missing 411 series is David Paulides never out and out says, this is what's doing this. he doesn't give his opinion. He just presents the data, and I think that's the best approach. I mean, you allow people to a chance to make up their own mind on what they're seeing and what you're filming. And I think that's the best approach. But at the same time, I think that there are more conclusions that can be drawn without you actually leading us to them, because in some of the areas you film, again, those tree structures, there's just simply nothing else it could be. And I find that fascinating, and it's a fantastic approach. And when you start looking at, like, when people start saying, well, Bigfoot is brought here by aliens, or they can go through portals and stuff like that, without going into what they call the woo, you just present the data. And I find that to be a very refreshing approach to this subject. I firmly believe you can't explain a mystery with another mystery. So until we solve the first mystery, we can't attribute other supernatural or alien or mystical properties to the creature until we actually prove it exists. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy most about your videos, is the fact that you just present it.
Yeah, but the thing is too, is if I run into something that is mystical and appears supernatural, and I get something on video or audio, I'm presenting it. I'm presenting it. You can make your own conclusions, but if it's woo and I do film something like that, I will present it.
And I'm not the guy that's going to say that the woo doesn't exist. I'm not gonna be that guy that just tosses a story out because it features elements of the woo. I mean, every encounter story out there, there's something we can learn from them, even the ones that we don't necessarily agree with. 20 years in law enforcement, I'm a very hands-on physical evidence kind of guy, but I won't rule out the possibility of other things because we simply don't know. And I enjoy your approach because it certainly challenges your perception of the things, but at the same time, it just presents it as, this is what it is, you decide.
Exactly. Yeah, it is the best way to go. And I wish like that was the case with all the other channels and everything else, but I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm not sure what more can be said about that. It's something that I wish, I agree with you. I wish more channels would do, and it's something I find very fascinating about the Missing 411, because even though he presents it in such a case that you start looking at it and you're like, this can't be something normal. This can't be something, because he rules out he doesn't even profile the cases where it could have been a bear, or it could have been, a wolf, or it could have been a human that did it. He brings in those cases where tracking dogs won't track. And I can tell you from, working law enforcement, dogs that are trained to track live for the track. And when they won't track something is very, very wrong.
Yeah, he always just presents the ones that are a real mystery, where it couldn't really be anything else than something unexplained. And
could it be like you said in that video that we talked about with the missing kid from the 1930s? Could it be a case of alien abduction? Yeah, maybe. Could it be some other cryptid we're not even aware of? Yeah, maybe. We don't know. But when you start talking about creatures that there's enough evidence out there that I firmly believe we have got a case for their existence, yeah, I think it's very possible that Bigfoot's taking a lot of these Missing 411 cases. And I think for us to outright dismiss the possibility that Bigfoot is taking people is naive. And it opens you up for a very dangerous precedent when you don't believe in something simply because you refuse to believe in it, even though there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that says the otherwise. You could very well find yourself running nose to nose with something you didn't believe in until you ran nose to nose with it.
Long before the Missing 411 books, they're all the indigenous tales of the people being taken. So when you put both of those together, it's like, in these old legends, it specifically says Sasquatch took this person.
Right.
It was Sasquatch.
Well, even in modern times, up along the one, I can't remember the name of the the highway number, but they call it the Highway of Tears in Canada, where so many Indigenous women have gone missing. Could that be the work of a serial killer? Sure. Could that be the work of of people just randomly killing people and making them disappear? Yeah. But does that explain all of them? No, it doesn't. There are some that just went missing under such bizarre circumstances that it really couldn't be anything else.
Yeah. It's totally possible, but it's inconclusive. Like, speculation, man. That's all we can do. It's like coming up with theories. It's like, man, like, how are we ever gonna prove any of this stuff?
Oh, I totally agree. But considering the amount of available evidence out there, some of largely anecdotal, eyewitness accounts, but you've got trackways in places where it's impossible. Well, okay, you can't say impossible, but the likelihood of it being a hoax is extremely unlikely. Mm-hmm. You've got hair follicles that have been taken. You've got eDNA that has been taken. You've got scat and blood evidence that have been captured. You've got the Skookum cast, which basically shows the entire body form of something that is obviously not an elk. It's not a moose. You can see the form of what this creature would be built like. To ignore all of that just because you want to keep your head in the sand like an ostrich is dangerous. At the worst, it's dangerous. At best, it's just being stupid, because something you don't believe in can still kill you.
Yeah, that is true. We don't know what's out there. There could be literally anything out there.
Absolutely. And I think it's a sad state of affairs when people will just completely ignore Native American lore, Native American opinion, Native American beliefs on these things, because they were here long before any of us. Their culture existed on this continent before any European settler ever set forth on North America. And across North America and even into South America and Central America, different tribes that had no contact with each other whatsoever are describing the same creature.
Yeah, that's the fascinating part.
Yeah, that in and of itself ought to give people pause, at least make them consider the possibility that that's out there. But then you throw in the thousands upon thousands of eyewitness accounts over the last 100 years, and then you look back at some of the articles that date back to some of these old newspapers from the 1800s, where they talk about such and such landowner was attacked by a wild man. And there are thousands of those articles out there from different places in the country. And then again, you toss in old maps where it's Devil's Canyon or Ape Canyon. Ape Canyon is a good reference. There's too many places on the map to just toss it out and go, oh, somebody just gave it a weird name. If it was one or two places, sure. But it's literally hundreds of places across North America that have something like Devil's Den, Wild Man Creek, Werewolf Hollow. There's just too many places like that for us to simply ignore it, because even anecdotal evidence comes from somewhere.
It really is shocking with all these anecdotes and all the evidence, like how it isn't being looked at closer by actual academics and scientists. Especially they study Native American history. Mm-hmm. Why would they not look closely at this as part of the history?
Fear of ostracism, man. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Fear of ostracism. Fear of being stigmatized in their own intellectual community.
There's so much Native American lore that's proven true. I mean, for years, what they used to refer to as hedge witches or shamans, for people that had a bad heart, they would prescribe a tea made from the foxglove plant. And
digitalis.
Yep, we get digitalis from the foxglove plant. So much of this Native American lore is proven true over the years that. Why do we just ignore it? Why do so many people go, oh, well, we can't accept that because it's just Native American lore? And then, look at, in more modern times, there were tribes in the Congo region that talked about the killer ape. And people were like, nah, it can't exist. No way. And then the National Geographic captured the Billy ape on camera and found out it was a real thing. I mean, those things are they're basically hyper aggressive chimpanzees that stand about 6 feet tall. They're a dangerous animal that basically was a cryptid until 20 years ago.
Yeah. I hope with time, it kind of the mystery unravels itself. Maybe it'll be kind of like the same case with like the UFO phenomena. When they find a way to use it to their advantage, they'll come out and say, hey guys, yeah, there actually is something out there.
Well, we are seeing more and more of that kind of being inserted into the mainstream very quietly. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources, they released that series of Bigfoot videos. And when I first heard about them, I thought, this is going to be done as a tongue-in-cheek joke. And it's not. There are numerous states that have passed laws against hunting Bigfoot. The state of Oklahoma offered a $3 million bounty on bringing one in alive. It's little by little becoming more and more mainstream. And I think some of that is because of some of the shows that are out there kind of bringing the subject more into the mainstream. But I also think little by little, they're admitting in degrees that these things exist. There's a picture that was sent to me from one of the viewers, and this is up in kind of in your neck of the woods. It's in Canada. This was actually on a Boy Scout camp. Let me see if I can get the image still. I know I still have it somewhere. Give me a second. Let me find it.
Sure.
There it is. This was on a Boy Scout, the wall of a Boy Scout camp in British Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
The Canadian government doesn't seem to have any problem admitting they're real.
But the thing with that is it's a Boy Scout camp, and you have to entertain the kids. And that is
true.
Highly entertaining.
Very true. But
so I don't know about that.
There are trailheads in the Pacific Northwest that are now having signs from the U.S. Forestry Service.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the legitimacy of that and
True.
what they're trying to do, but maybe they are trying to just slowly ease us into it.
I think it's very much like how recently in the last few years, they've little by little admitted UFOs exist. We're starting to see more dash cam footage. Not dash cam, cockpit footage from fighter jets being released. And the government basically just said, yeah, UFOs are a real thing. But it kind of got overlooked by the media, considering everything that's going on in the world right now. Little by little, they're admitting the existence of stuff that would have been considered tinfoil hat territory 10 years ago.
Yeah, that is true. I'm always wondering what the reasons for that would be. They're just trying to get the information out there. But I just feel like not many things that they do are for our benefit. So I don't know what their reasoning would be. Like it's with the UFO subject, they're trying to make it sound like they're dangerous and there's a threat and we need to be able to like have a defense force against this alien threat. And it's like, okay, I don't think they came here to bully some little earthly like human beings. Like what could we do for them that they don't already have? We're pathetic compared to them.
Yeah, that's a good point. But then, what was it Ronald Reagan said in a speech back in the 80s? He said, what this world needs to unite it is a common threat from the outside.
I mean, yeah. Is that for the better, though, or for the worse?
It's hard
to
say.
Like having a one world kind of, one world government or something like that. Bring all the people together under that guise. I
think that a unified planet is inevitable. I think it'll happen at one point, whether we all like it or not. I think it is to a certain degree inevitable, but I think we're going to have to put away a lot of differences before that can actually happen. There's still, too many petty differences, be that over politics, religion. There's a dozen things that separate us. I've always told people, that if you really want to dislike somebody, you don't have to look very hard to find a reason. You can always find a reason to dislike somebody. But the hard part is embracing somebody despite those differences. and not everybody's capable of doing that. At least not at this point. I think at some point in the future, sure, but we're still killing each other in the name of religion. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the future of the subject is going to be and how it's going to go in the next 10 years. I always wonder, like, when will it be? Literally tomorrow, someone could have a body.
Right.
And that's crazy to think about. And there's people who, claim they have bodies as well.
I think that there was a time that the government would have actively moved to suppress something like that, like the stories out of Mount St. Helens where they found bodies. There have also been stories of people that hit one with their car and the government seized the body. We've all heard those accounts, but I think those days may be not 100% behind us. I don't think it's as far-fetched to think it's going to happen at some point where the government's just going to go, fine, you've got a body, do with it what you will. And I don't think they're ever going to just come clean. I don't think they're going to present all the evidence and go, boom, here it is. You guys deal with it. They're out there. I think at some point they're just going to go, fine, there's enough evidence out there, let people accept it, and we can play dumb. We're like, oh, we didn't know. I think considering the number of missing 411 cases and incidents where there have been fatalities involving cryptids, from the reports that have come in from all over the country, even all over the world, I don't think they're ever going to admit it and just say, okay, we've known about it for years, because that would require a certain amount of culpability in those disappearances. But if somebody brings it forth at some point and says, hey, we've discovered this species, they're going to go, hey, would you look at that? We didn't know anything about it. You can't blame us.
Yeah. I wonder. Or they might be like, yeah, this is probably what's responsible for this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I wonder. Like I really do wonder, like these, like the government agencies and like parks and whatnot, like national parks. I wonder if they do have teams of people that are actually actively investigating Sasquatch.
I think they do.
You think they do?
There's a number of, there's actually dozens of accounts out there where people, like the Dennis Martin story, they brought in military units to look into that. How often do they bring in military units on a missing kid? It just doesn't happen. I've been in situations where I've helped look for people that were missing, and they never brought in military units. It was just volunteers. The fact that they brought in a military team, to me, says they knew something was going on more than they were telling people. And there are lots of accounts where people were claimed they were attacked, and then shortly later a military unit showed up and they went in and they dealt with the problem. In fact, it was that premise that military units were being called in to deal with dangerous cryptids is why I created my book series, the Codename Wild Hunt series. Granted, what I write is primarily fiction. I don't do big compendiums of different cryptids and things like that. I write fiction. To me, that's just where I like horror. I've always written horror. So that's probably what I'm always going to stick with. But even fiction has to have that plausibility to it. Over the last 40 years, I've collected hundreds and hundreds of encounter stories from people, not only listening to them on podcasts, but people I've talked to personally. And those behaviors of those creatures is what I use to create the behaviors of creatures in my book. So I try to make the books as plausible and believable as possible, given the subject. But I think it's just a matter of time until we find out that there's really a group like that out there.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's even stories here in Alberta, people have apparently seen like military helicopters buzzing around, like in these areas where there's supposed to be Sasquatch. There was somebody apparently who hit one with a truck, and not that long later, there was a big truck that showed up to haul this thing out and take it. I don't know about the truth to any of it, but these are like stories that you just hear floating around that that aren't out there in public, really. It's like, man.
I mean, these are the cases where truth is stranger than fiction, right?
Yeah, I've never personally like seen any weird like military groups or operations going on out in the bush. I don't know if I ever will.
Mm-hmm.
But like, even if you did see something, they could easily just say like, "Oh, we're training exercise."
I got told to leave an area one time, and I was a cop at the time. I got told to leave an area that I was kind of poking around, probably where I shouldn't have been, by a guy that told me he was with Fish and Game. But the funny thing is I know all the Fish and Game guys that work in that area, and he wasn't one of them.
Yeah, didn't you get a couple of phone calls too about some of your stuff in your books, DA?
When I first released my Codename Wild Hunt, my first Codename Wild Hunt book, which is about a military team that hunts dangerous cryptids, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine that's still in Special Forces, and he's like, "Hey, man, I don't know where you're getting your intel, but you're making some folks nervous." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, you kind of hit the nail a little close to the head on a couple things." He says, "I know you're writing fiction here, but you kind of made some folks nervous." I'm like, "Well, that wasn't my intention." He said, "Where are you getting your intel?" I said, "Well, I've just taken so many accounts over the years where people talk about special forces units coming in cleaning up these situations. I just kind of built from that." He goes, "Well, all I can tell you, brother, is you hit a little too close to the head for some people's comfort levels."
See, you're more than just a hat rack, man. You're more than just a hat rack. It comes from that big old brain of yours.
Big old melon.
Yeah, because you and I talked offline about how some of that stuff was extremely similar to some of the things I had worked with in the past.
Well, Doc was a Special Forces medic, and even he was like, "Hey, you kind of hit the nail close to the head on some of the tech here." And all I did was I basically did what Tom Clancy did. I looked at what was publicly available, and I took it to the next logical step, and I hit it a little close to the head on a couple of things.
That's crazy. I wonder what kind of technology they have that would allow them to track something down and take it out or do whatever. Like,
You'd be
compared to what we have, we can never find them. But so what would they have that would allow them to just go in and get them?
Dude, you would be stunned what they can do with modern satellite technology.
I
know back in the 80s when I was in, satellite technology was good enough that they could read the newspaper in somebody's hand. And that was in the 80s.
That's insane.
Yeah. There's a series of satellites called the Keyhole series. Those satellites are unbelievable what they're capable of. And they are, to say they are generations ahead of anything that's in civilian hands is an understatement.
I guess if they can take pictures of like planets and solar systems so far away, then it's like it's not that hard to get clear satellite images of something right here on Earth. Right.
Yeah, the technology goes into some of those spy satellites is just astounding.
Crazy. Yeah. That's crazy to think about because I've never really thought about that until now. What they would have and like as far as tools go at their disposal.
Yeah. Your mind would be blown, man. I mean, I don't even have a security clearance anymore, but I can't even imagine. But
yeah, my clearance has been expired for decades, and I can tell you, when I was in, the technology was astounding.
Yeah, look what they did with Bin Laden. I mean, come on. I mean, really, that was all satellite imaging. I mean,
well, during the first Gulf War, we all saw footage during the first Gulf War. They put a smart bomb down the chimney of a factory, not hit the building. They put it down a chimney. And I know for a fact that 3 decades ago, they were able to use targeting systems on cruise missiles where they would aim them not at a building, not at a city block. They would aim them at a single brick on the side of a building from 1,500 miles away, and they would hit within plus or minus brick.
Well, we're all carrying a little spy in our hands right now. So
they'll hold it, track you everywhere you go.
Yep. Yeah. Do we know all these people in the comments? There might be some plants here from the
it's entirely possible. Well, yeah. Yesterday my wife and I were talking about stuff we needed for the shows we do where we go and take the books. And I mentioned that I needed a new foldable dolly. It wasn't an hour later that I was starting to get, getting advertisements for foldable dollies in my feed. I'm like,
bro, don't even laugh. That happens here with us, with me and John. We'll be talking about something, then he'll be on the computer, and an hour later, stuff will pop up on his computer.
Yeah,
it, like, listens to everything you're saying with keywords. It's crazy.
Everything talks, and here's the thing, man. There's technology is out there. The truth is out there. Will we ever know everything?
No.
Only if it's allowed. Just like the stuff DA's talked about with all the UFO stuff. Oh, and by the way, UFOs are real. And again, I go back to this all the time. With any kind of cryptid stuff, with all the missing people and everything like that, are these organizations going to really? Are they going to allow themselves to be culpable for this? That's always
no, they will not.
Right. Yeah, that's always the question. Yes.
Exactly.
Just say it. So there's my tinfoil hat off.
I don't think they would ever allow that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just a nurse. What do I know? So anyway.
I'm just a guy.
I'm just a dude, pretending to do, playing another dude.
Being a dude.
Yeah. So
Tropical Thunder.
Yeah. Great movie.
There we go. Good movie.
Yeah, Justin, thanks, man, for all the info, man. You've been
bro.
Dude.
Yeah, I'm kind of like petering out. I'm like exhausted from like just life, like not the actual podcast here, but the interview.
Yeah, I know, man. Well, I'm not. Yeah, I know exactly what's going on, but
I'm not sure with you, brother. I've been teaching the last 2 weeks, and on the road the last 2 weeks. So I'm right there with you, man. So
yeah,
I give it all I got when I'm teaching. So I'm at the end of my rope right now, and I got a 13-hour drive tomorrow. So
holy crap! Yeah, no, it's fun though. Like I love this style of show where it's just like kind of like a discussion, a conversation.
Yeah.
Not strictly like an interview. Those are pretty boring.
No.
And everyone always ends up asking the same question.
Oh yeah.
No, we get off subject. We get off subject a lot. And that's common.
Yeah.
So.
We derail the topic train all the time, but it's just like DA said. Yeah. This is just an informal conversation between a few dudes who want to rap about some things and maybe get some clarification, maybe, give our own theories about stuff. And I think honestly that gives our audience and each other a lot more information. And I think it's just like anything else, just like a class. We learn from it. We learn from each other. We learn from different viewpoints and different perspectives on things. And I think that makes us all better.
Right. Oh, for sure. And then you have the opportunity when there's 4 people sitting around, like you could just come up with even more theories.
Some ideas.
Yeah,
that's something I wish happened more in the cryptid community. I wish there was less infighting. You get too many people that want to either monetize or they want to be the guy that brings in the legend.
Yeah.
If there was more sharing of information and less infighting, I think we'd be a lot farther into this subject than we currently are. Because there's far too many people that it's all about them. It's all about them making a name. It's all about them becoming famous or making money off of it. It's not about, what can we do to further this investigation? What can we do to further this research? And I'm an open book. Anybody that's got any questions. I don't claim to be an expert on any subject. All I have is my own opinions and things I've gathered over the years, and I am happy to share those with anybody. So, if anybody's got any questions that they want answered, I may not have the answer, but I give you an answer. It might not be the right one, but it's the right one for my situation. It's what I've observed, and I'm happy to share those with anybody that wants them.
It's all about. I think the thing is what I've loved about DA for all the years I've known him, and Anthony since I've known him, is that there's no ego here, and the egos are any egos are checked at the door, but there's no egos here, and it's not about a tactical Schwanstucker measuring contest. It's all about just getting info out to people and let people draw their own conclusions, because like DA's always said, there's no expert in this field. And if you claim yourself as an expert, you've automatically debunked yourself.
Exactly.
You automatically discredited yourself. There's no experts because there's nothing that we can put our hands on, you know. I mean, and until, like DA said, until there's a body, you know, everything is pure conjecture. But there's a lot of evidence to support a strong hypothesis.
Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to like not answer questions with "I don't know." Like a lot of times I have to just do that. I don't know.
I'm a firm believer. If I don't know something, I'm going to tell you. I'm like, oh, yeah, I may not have the answer. I mean, none of us have all the answers.
Right.
Nope.
Yeah.
There's nobody out there that knows, you know, what a Sasquatch is saying. They don't know what the tree structures mean. We don't know what the wood knocks mean. You know, I asked Justin many questions about that tonight, about what he thought they meant, because I try to ask that for everybody that's got boots on the ground investigation, because we've all got different ideas. Yeah. And when you examine other people's ideas on this, you know, when you can compare notes, you can compare ideas, I think eventually we're going to get to the truth of the matter, because it's not something that any one of us is going to go, okay, this is what I think it is, and everybody should agree with me. You know, it's not like that. You know, everybody's got a different perspective on this, and that's why I love Justin's channel. That's one of one of my favorite reasons for watching his videos, because he doesn't just cram an opinion down your throat. He presents the information. Yeah. And that, to me, is the absolute perfect way to approach this subject. Present the information, let people interpret that and absorb that information as they do. And Justin, I can't thank you much for that. I can't thank you enough for that approach, because it is freaking awesome.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, to me, that's a lot more credible than any self-proclaimed expert out there. You've got a lot of information. Let people extrapolate the data how they will and come to their own conclusions. Period.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Thank you for answering me. I know you're busy, and I know what's going on in your life, and I appreciate you coming on the show, man, and
absolutely
really opening up like that. But yeah, I really appreciate you talking to me, man.
Yeah,
no worries. So like it's nice to get on stuff like this to distract from like real life stuff. So
exactly. I know.
We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us three knuckleheads and rap about all this stuff, because it's been very eye-opening, and I think the audience would concur with that as well.
Yeah, it's been really fun, and I appreciate being on here. So,
hey, anytime you want to come back, like especially when you're getting ready to do Legend Meet Science 2, if you want to promote that, we would love to have you back. I appreciate you, great deal, more than you know, to come on here and just talk with us. Again, I'm a huge fan of your series. You've got a fantastic channel. I think everybody that's listening tonight should go check his channel out. Make sure you like and subscribe to that channel. Show him some love. I mean, he's got a fantastic channel out there. And if you haven't watched any of his documentaries, I definitely recommend you start with the Expedition Sasquatches, because those are fantastic videos. The evidence is just presented as what it is. It's not sensationalized. Right. It's not over dramatized. It's just presented. And to me, that's the best approach.
It's not jammed down your throat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Justin, I've posted your link several times tonight to Mountain Beast Mysteries.
Sure.
I posted it several times in the show. Before we head out of here, we usually only do about 2 hours, but we kind of went long tonight, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. Before we go, give us a little bit more about where to find you, what projects you're working on, anything you want to plug. Now's the time. Plug away.
The best thing to do is to just go to Mountain Beast Mysteries on YouTube, and you can subscribe there, because all my content I put on YouTube for free. So that's where it all is. That's where all the good stuff is. I mean, I do have other social media pages, like there's a Mountain Beast Mysteries Facebook page, and my Instagram page is just my name, Justin Chernipeski. And I'm easy to find because I'm the only Justin Chernipeski in the world. So there's not a lot of Chernipeski.
Well,
your last name's not common.
When I introduced you.
Yeah.
Because I'm usually bad with pronouncing names.
Well, it's a tough one sometimes. When I was a kid, and the school, on the school announcements, they would call my name down to the, I don't know, the office or whatever, and they'd mess up my name. Dude, that was embarrassing every single time.
Yeah, they did mine too. I'm Italian. That's what they did to mine. Don't feel bad. I'm right there with you. You know, right there with you.
Well, again, Justin, thank you so much for coming in. Folks, remember, there are no experts in this field. All we have is opinion and evidence gathered, and we present that evidence in a way that allows you to choose what you believe. I'm not going to dismiss anybody's account because it might disagree with my own personal opinions. I'm not going to say that's impossible because we don't know. Everybody has a theory on this, and everybody's theory is as equally as valid as any of ours. What we're doing is gathering information, gathering evidence, gathering citing reports, and presenting those as what they are. You can draw your own conclusions. You can decide whether or not you believe it's real. I'm sure there are people out there that think we're just absolutely full of it, and that's okay. That's your opinion. I'm not going to argue with you. But we enjoy presenting this subject, and it's something I'm going to continue to present. And I want to continue to bring guys like Justin, who are out there in the deep woods, boots on the ground, bringing us some fantastic video and it's showing us some of the things that, in many cases, many of us will never get into places like that. That is not for the faint of heart. It's not like one day you get out of bed and go, you know what? I'm going 25 miles into the backcountry and spending a week. Not everybody can do that. So you check out his videos because you're going to see a side of nature that you're not normally going to see. Even going into national parks and hiking trails, you're not going to get that far off the beaten path. These are some fantastic videos in places where you're not going to find another person. You may not run into another person for days. And I guarantee he's been in places, Justin's been in places where it was a while before he saw another person or even a sign of another person. And that's why I enjoy his videos so much, because they're raw. They're presented as what they are. He shows us what he finds. He doesn't sensationalize it. He doesn't over dramatize it. It is just presented as this is what it is. And there's not enough of that, in my opinion, in this field. There's way too much drama. There's way too much overly presented things with red circles where there's nothing. And, we don't have enough people just presenting things the way they are. And I thoroughly and completely appreciate everything you do, Justin. It's a fantastic method. You've got a fantastic channel, and I appreciate you very much, man.
Thank you so much. Like I said before, that means a lot. It's been like a lot of work putting everything all together. So it's like to hear stuff like that, it means a lot.
Well, the hard work shows, and you've got over 100,000 subs, and I hope you get to 1 million and nothing flat. And if there's anything we can ever do to help, like when documentaries are coming out, or you've got any other any other evidence you want to present, we are happy to have you back at any time. I completely mean this when I say the door is always open. You've spent a last couple hours talking with us, and you're now one of the gang as far as I'm concerned. So you are welcome back anytime.
Perfect. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll for sure come back.
Awesome. Folks, I've said this many times. I'll say it again. Stories are journeys we take together. And I've been thrilled and privileged that so many people have chosen to take this journey with us. We are only starting on this journey. We've got a long way to go, and I will hope to be continuing presenting this when we're, at show number 1,000. So we've got a long future, and I want to keep presenting this kind of content. And if you do enjoy this type of content, make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and swing by Justin's Mountain Beast Mysteries. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button over there. Share these videos with people far and wide that enjoy this kind of content. And it's through your efforts, through that like and that subscribing to those channels, that allows us to get farther, that allows us to reach more audiences and to grow our channels. And even though we're still a growing channel. Doesn't mean we don't welcome new people. We are constantly looking for new audience or for people that enjoy this kind of content, and I hope you will continue to share this kind of content with people, because that's how this continues to present. That's how we continue to bring this kind of topic to all of you. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Justin, again, thank you for coming on tonight. It is very much appreciated. You are welcome back at any time. And we've had a fantastic time tonight. We've discussed a lot of really cool topics, and I hope you guys will join us. We won't be back this Saturday because I have an engagement that I have to be at. So we will be back next Wednesday night. And I hope you guys will join us then. We're going to have a great time then as well. Again, Justin, thanks again for coming on. Thank you guys for being with us tonight. You guys have been fantastic, and we will see you guys next Wednesday. Hope you guys have a wonderful night and a wonderful weekend. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAX Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.